On the way back, the whole group walked together. This was one of the best parts of college life, doing something as a group. It was a collective experience, one that had forged their friendships at an accelerated pace. Being part of this felt different from any future relationships with colleagues or new friends. The college collective was the purest kind, free of conflicting interests, all about moving forward together. With coworkers, there was always the pressure of promotions. Even if there wasn't direct competition, after spending all day being corporate workhorses together, the last thing you wanted was to see them after hours. It felt too much like overtime. That's why company retreats were a nightmare for young people. Just another form of mandatory work. And new friends you made when you were older? The odds of running into a train wreck were high. It was harder to be open and vulnerable with people. And if someone suddenly made you want to be, it usually meant they were about to take you for everything you had. Even marriage was easier when you were young and clueless. Once you got older and started thinking things through, the appeal faded. But the friends you made in college were different. They were pre-screened by the university, then screened again by you, until only the ones who truly clicked remained. It just made life more enjoyable. Alex mentioned in his family's group chat that he was helping out at his roommate's new restaurant. He'd expected his mom to lecture him about wasting his time, but Director Yang had been surprisingly understanding. She said a place like a restaurant was a great way to get real-world experience, to meet all sorts of people. And since it was on campus, it was a safe environment to learn. Director Yang had always secretly worried her son was too sheltered, that he'd never seen real hardship. It was the classic mother's paradox. You never want your kids to suffer, but you worry that if they don't suffer now, they'll face something much worse later. Helping his roommate would be a good way for Alex to grow, and it would strengthen his friendships. She gave him her full encouragement. Besides, for a regular undergraduate in their senior year, there wasn't much more deep academic knowledge to cram in. Learning how to get things done and how to deal with people was a crucial part of education, too. Jordan didn't mention it to his family. They already thought he was just goofing off at school. The fact that he'd managed to snag a national scholarship had them convinced it was just a fluke, that their prayers had finally been answered at the right time of day. As long as he was at school and not causing any major trouble, they were content. Sean's family didn't meddle at all. At his age, he was already the pillar of his household. They were the ones calling him for advice. That left Leo. He'd changed so much that he wasn't sure how to even begin explaining it to his parents. He worried that if he told them, they'd think he'd been scammed and rushed to campus to check on him. In their minds, he was still just their little Leo. Without seeing him in person, they'd never be able to reconcile the change. After just 2 days of cooking, however, he was already starting to feel like the novelty was wearing off. The work felt a bit repetitive. The thought of doing this day in and day out forever was suddenly daunting. A young man who hadn't even found his footing was already dreaming of flying. He felt like food this good should be expensive, but if he priced it too high, he'd lose the student customer base. The restaurant was meant to be an upscale casual spot, not some Michelin-star establishment. And if he started focusing only on profit, he'd have to cut corners, and the original spirit of the place would be lost. Not that he'd had much of a spirit to begin with. He'd stumbled into owning a restaurant completely by accident. For now, though, he was happy. Working with his roommates, Stella, and Jessica still felt like they were all playing house, role-playing a fun little project. But he had a nagging feeling it wouldn't last. What did it even mean to run this place successfully? If it meant he had to be here every day scaling fish, Sean's TikTok account would have to be renamed "The Fish My Roommate Scaled Could Circle the Globe Twice." Leo sighed. He really wasn't cut out for big things. 2 days of cooking, and he was already having second thoughts. Cooking for fun was one thing. Cooking as a business was another entirely. As they walked, waves from the campus lake lapped against the stone retaining wall, the sound growing louder at the turns. The campus lights were perfectly spaced, casting just the right amount of light, accompanied by the perfect sound of the waves and the perfect cool breeze. It was winter, but the walk had warmed them all up. Jessica was wearing the new cashmere coat her mother, Julianne, had bought her, cozy and comfortable. Money was a wonderful thing, especially if you could earn it yourself. Hannah Chun had blended in seamlessly with their group. She and Jessica hit it off immediately, bonding over their similar working-class backgrounds and part-time job experiences. Hannah was easy to get along with, as long as you weren't overly dramatic or entitled. When she'd gone to the kitchen to help, she had effortlessly lifted a huge tub of fish that must have weighed over 50 pounds. Stella, who had been working on her own arm strength, was deeply impressed. That single act was enough to win her over. Stella's criteria for friendship were, as always, a little strange. As for Sean, while he found Hannah different from other girls, his deep-seated insecurity kept him from striking up a conversation. He just buried himself in his work. But anyone who knew him could see the change in his energy today. He was practically buzzing with a quiet excitement. He was usually so reserved, but today, a smile seemed to be permanently etched on his face. Leo's assessment of Hannah was pragmatic. The system showed her initial favorability toward him was 69. But as they ate their late-night meal, he watched the numbers climb. She took a bite of fish, and it ticked up to 70. A taste of the hot sauce, 72. A sip of milk tea, 75. A bite of sponge cake, 79. It was the first time Leo had encountered someone whose affection was governed entirely by their stomach. In the course of a single meal, her favorability had jumped 20 points. She was definitely a foodie, and one with a sweet tooth. The group ambled back in clusters of 2s and 3s. Leo and Stella walked together, their linked hands swinging a little wider as they passed the foot of the hill with the pavilion. It was too cold now for a climb to the viewpoint. Back in the dorm, Jordan was already hungry again. Did everyone just inhale dinner? I swear I didn't get enough. Leo deadpanned. It's your imagination. You were inhaling it just as fast as everyone else. After a quick round of showers, they huddled around the illicit space heater Jordan had smuggled in. Over in the girls' dorm, Hannah, Stella, and Jessica weren't on the same floor, but they were in the same building. When Stella and Jessica got back to their room, it was cold. Their other 2 roommates were away on internships. Stella had her assistant bring over an electric heater. With the dorm so empty senior year, the power grid could handle a slightly higher load without tripping the breaker. It was mainly for Jessica, who had been really sick recently. Logically, Stella should have gone home to avoid getting infected, especially since Leo was out of town in the capital. But she'd stayed, feeling it was too sad for Jessica to be alone. In that moment, Stella Vance was nothing like her father, Richard. He would never have let sentiment win out over practicality. With just the 2 of them, their relationship had become more harmonious. After Jessica recovered from her illness, during which Stella's assistant had delivered all her meals, she took over most of the chores like boiling water and cleaning, though it never got very messy with just 2 people. Having come to terms with the fact that her birth mother was alive, Jessica was now thinking about starting a small business. For the first time, she wanted to make money with her brain, not just her body. Stella thought it was a great idea. Just having the courage to try was a huge step. She didn't offer to lend her money, though. Jessica was resourceful. If she was truly confident in her idea, she'd ask Stella or her mother for help. This was just the exploratory phase. Besides, being shameless enough to ask for money was a crucial part of being an entrepreneur. If you couldn't do that, you might not fail spectacularly, but you'd never make it big either. The real danger was the types who started out saying, "Give me $5 million, and I'll make you $500 million. Those $5 million were usually just a down payment on an epic failure. For Stella, life had changed dramatically. She hadn't lost friends by getting a boyfriend. She'd gained several. It felt like she was only now, in her senior year, starting to live a normal college life. Before, she had always been an observer, never truly a participant. Back in her warm room, she was surprised to get a text from her father. "Richard Vance, how are things going the last couple of days?" As a boss, if you gave an employee a bonus, you expected at least a thank you note, if not a pledge of undying loyalty. But when you gave one to your daughter, you got radio silence. And that assistant of his, Mr. Lou, who he thought was so sharp. It was like sending a meatball to a dog, gone without a trace. He hadn't heard a peep from him. What could they possibly be so busy with? Mr. Lou is busy digesting, Stella thought. We ate a lot. She sent her dad a picture of the table laden with food. Steamed fish, hot sauce, sponge cake, milk tea, the culinary tonic. The staff's dinner. Richard Vance. You're making me hungry in the middle of the night. He typed again. Richard Vance. Looks pretty decent. The chef at this place has some skill. Stella sent one more message. Stella, he made it. Yummy. Richard Vance. Is this what I paid for you to learn English for? So you could use it on your old man? Have you ever seen Washington, D.C.? At 5 a.m. At 5 a.m., Leo was still asleep, probably in that light, dream-filled state just before waking. But at 5 a.m., Dylan Sloan was already on his way to the airport. He saw the capital in its rare moment of peace. No traffic, just wide, empty streets. He was exhausted. A yawn forced tears from the corners of his eyes. He'd gotten maybe 4 hours of sleep, finally nodding off after 1 a.m., only to be up before dawn. He'd asked his assistant to book the flight, and the idiot had, of course, picked the earliest possible one. He'd have to catch up on sleep on the plane. And it wasn't even a large jet where he could lie down, just a mid-size where he'd have to lean against the window. Dylan used to have a fantastic assistant, someone who handled every little detail. But then his grandfather had passed away, the family had fractured, and he couldn't even hold on to a good employee. The guy had moved on to bigger and better things, and Dylan couldn't blame him. He'd even given him a glowing recommendation. He thought he was finished, but then, out of nowhere, a lifeline appeared. What seemed like a disaster had turned into a blessing, connecting him to the young tyrant, Liam Ingram. His horse ranch on the outskirts of D.C. was safe. It was more than just a ranch. That was just the opening salvo. If he couldn't hold on to his own property, he wouldn't be able to hold on to anything else. It was a test, a pawn sent to kick him and see if he'd fight back. Since he did, the rest of the army held back. Dylan knew he couldn't just send a gift to Liam. The kid wouldn't accept it. He couldn't send one to the guy who'd made the introduction, either. He was on a political career track and wouldn't risk accepting anything overt. But in this day and age, no one did you a favor for no reason. So Dylan decided to fly to Bridgeport himself to properly express his gratitude. Actions, not words. He told his assistant to book a table at a highly rated restaurant near Leo's university. When you're treating someone important, you pick a place convenient for them, not the other way around. You don't make them drive an hour to your neighborhood just to eat at some place you like. That's not hosting. That's just messing with people. The assistant could sense his boss's irritation with the early start, but he felt wronged. The boss had been the one who said he wanted to get there early to take care of business. Now that it was early, he was annoyed. So hard to please. Booking the restaurant was easy enough. He filtered by near Northwood State. On Yelp, looked for a place with a nice atmosphere suitable for a business meeting, and found a private kitchen that looked perfect from the pictures and reviews. He planned to reserve a private room. Seeing that it wasn't open yet, he figured he'd call later. He sent the choice to his boss. Dylan usually traveled with an assistant, but this one was so unreliable, he wasn't sure who would be taking care of whom. He decided to go alone. He'd find a new, competent one when he got back. He did, however, have a friend in this city, a beautiful, highly educated woman he'd almost married. But back then, the Sloan family was at its peak, and they were too proud to approve. The girl had a temper of her own and refused to waste her youth in D.C., promptly returning to her hometown. He heard she was doing very well for herself, had passed the civil service exams, and was already a deputy director in the state comptroller's office. They were still connected on social media and would occasionally exchange a few words. He tried to sleep on the plane, but couldn't. Maybe he was getting old. He used to be able to pull 3 all-nighters in a row without a problem. Now, losing a few hours of sleep left him feeling drained. The stress was getting to him. The flight was smooth, at least. As the plane landed, he breathed in the city's unfamiliar, damp, and cold air and sent Leo a message. Leo, I happen to be in town for business near your school. I'd like to treat you and your roommates to dinner tonight at that private kitchen right by campus. You guys in? The message had barely gone through when his assistant called. Boss, I'm so sorry, but that restaurant I sent you is fully booked. Dylan was baffled. You didn't book it in advance? Didn't I tell you yesterday? All the private rooms are taken. The assistant sounded miserable. Who would have thought a restaurant at a university on a weekday would be completely booked? Dylan wanted to fire him on the spot. But he'd already told Leo the plan, and it would look bad to back out now. He controlled his temper. Fine, no private room. Just get us a quiet table in the main dining area. The assistant's voice on the other end dropped to a guilty whisper. Boss, there are no tables in the main dining area either. It's completely full. Not a single seat. They said the earliest opening is in 3 days. Dylan was speechless. What? What kind of ridiculous place was this? Since when did a small city restaurant have this kind of pull? Dawn was breaking. It was going to be a clear day. He'd seen the sunset while scaling fish in the kitchen yesterday. A red sky at night was a sailor's delight. After all, Leo loved winters at the university. There was less rain and more sun. On sunny days, even in winter, it never felt too cold. The campus rarely saw snow, but it saw plenty of students making interesting fashion choices. Of all the trends, the one he disliked most was nude-colored tights. The kind that, from a distance, looked like bare legs, but up close you realized, nope, it's fabric. The uncanny valley effect was just creepy. College guys were too young to appreciate whatever kind of sexy that was supposed to be. It just gave them the shivers. Of course, not many were brave enough for any kind of tights. Some of the first and second-year girls liked to wear elaborate, frilly dresses that made them look like giant, colorful butterflies, often paired with white stockings. He couldn't say he was a fan of that look either, though he'd heard those outfits were surprisingly expensive. All that fabric made them look like porcelain dolls. If he ever walked next to a girl dressed like that, he felt like he should be wearing a tuxedo just to match. The girls in black tights, on the other hand, were usually confident in their legs. He remembered the photo of Jessica that had gone viral on the campus network, the one that had crowned her the prettiest girl in the English department. She'd been wearing black tights in that picture. Thinking back, she was probably on her way to a part-time job. Black tights, white sneakers, a gray pleated skirt, a white sweater, and a fuzzy brown-gray athletic jacket. Her long black hair was loose around her shoulders. It wasn't an expensive outfit, but it was a perfect mix of fresh-faced youth, studious innocence, and a hint of allure that college students could definitely appreciate. Leo blinked. Why was he thinking about tights first thing in the morning? That culinary tonic last night was supposed to boost his energy, not his libido. He did feel full of energy, though. He opened his eyes and saw that Jordan was already awake. Playing games this early? Alex was already up, scrolling through international news. Sean was going through his normal morning routine. Their early start made Leo feel like he was the one who was late. He glanced at the prized Patek Philippe on his wrist. The time matched his phone. A sense of secret satisfaction washed over him. Getting a head start on the day felt like a stolen treasure. But if they all started getting up at the same time, it would just turn into an arms race. If he started getting up at 5, and they followed suit, it would be a vicious cycle of competitive waking. After washing up, Leo came back and asked if anyone wanted to go for a run. Jordan patted his stomach, considered the effort, and gave up. Alex, who had run with Leo yesterday morning and then worked as a waiter in the afternoon, claimed his calves were still sore. Pass. Sean thought for a moment. He could film Leo running. He could jog alongside him. He didn't really like exercise for its own sake. Back home, he did so much physical labor that the idea of running for fun was absurd. If he had that much spare energy, he could go shovel some manure. The new fitness equipment they'd installed in his village was mostly used by kids as a playground, or by a few grandmas who would gather there to gossip while watching their grandchildren. As a cameraman, though, you had to be fit. Sean could run alongside Leo, camera in hand, without getting winded. Who was in better shape, really? It used to be that when Sean talked to people, he'd unconsciously let his mouth hang open, which made him look a bit slow and easy to bully. He'd slouch, his eyes would dart around, and he'd never make direct eye contact, always worried people wouldn't like him. All those little things made people overlook the fact that he was a 6-foot-tall guy from the Northwest who could ride a horse. But now, thanks to his filming, editing, and the success of their TikTok account, his confidence had grown. He'd seen more of the world with Leo. Now, when he listened to someone, he made a conscious effort to keep his mouth closed, to relax his posture, and to hold his gaze steady. He stood up straight, shoulders back. When he felt slighted, he no longer looked down and stewed in his own thoughts. Even if he didn't know what to say, he would at least meet the other person's eyes until they backed down. With his back straight, he was an imposing figure, his smile no longer timid, but confident and genuine. Sean felt great today. It was strange. He was busier and working harder than ever, but he felt like he had boundless energy. Alex and Jordan felt it too, waking up as if they'd had the most restful sleep of their lives. But they were young, so it wasn't that unusual. However, some of the restaurant's customers from last night woke up feeling unusually refreshed. They'd slept soundly and had an abundance of energy. The retired woman, in particular, felt a surge of strength. Normally, she woke up with a numb right hand, a scary sensation that made her worry about her heart. But this morning, there was no numbness at all. She got up, feeling spry, and headed out to buy her daughter some breakfast. Leo and Sean went for their run. They stopped first at Professor Reed's usual workout spot. She was back to her daily routine here, and she felt much better than she had in the capital. Back there, the air quality was too unpredictable for an early morning workout. Leo started his warm-up and brought his dilemma to her. He'd learned that while she didn't meddle, if you asked for her advice, she would give you a clear, logical answer. Even if she didn't have a direct solution, she had a way of helping him see things more clearly. In the soft morning light, the young man followed the old woman's movements, slapping his arms and legs. Sean found the scene amusing. If he sped it up in the edit, it would look comical. Paired with Leo's handsome face, it would create a charming, quirky contrast. Leo normally did standard stretches, but following Professor Reed, he found himself mirroring her wide, sweeping motions. Her methods were clearly effective, so he figured he couldn't go wrong by copying her. Professor Reed had grown fond of Leo. He was her workout buddy now. She was even fine with being filmed. She posted her own videos of flowers on TikTok. From a mathematical perspective, she explained TikTok's business model could be analyzed through network effects, power law distribution, the attention economy, and game theory. The foundation of TikTok's profitability, she said, tapping her fingers, is its user base. The relationship between revenue and users can be described by Metcalfe's law. V is proportional to N squared, where V is the platform's value and N is the number of users. It's a positive feedback loop. Essentially, she concluded, simplifying, TikTok's success is a victory for mathematics. Scale times efficiency times monopoly. What you and your friends are doing aligns with mathematical and economic principles. It's a viable path to success in today's world. It's different from my time. Back then, working in a factory was an honor. Selling vegetables was an honor. Researching missiles was an honor. Everyone had their part to play, and it was all about hard work. Now, hard work alone isn't enough. The marginal utility is too low. But if you can combine hard work with smart documentation, what you're doing on TikTok is a very positive endeavor. Leo then asked her what he should do about feeling burned out from cooking after just 2 days. It wasn't physical fatigue, but the thought of the future, of being stuck cooking forever, that made him feel hopeless. Professor Reed gave him 2 points. First, enjoy the present. I have no idea what the future holds. What if aliens invade tomorrow? Second, while you're still enjoying the process of cooking, I'm bringing some friends for dinner this afternoon. Leo blinked. Okay, so much for profound wisdom. He'd gotten a dinner reservation instead. After his warm-up, he said goodbye to Professor Reed. Sean promised to send her the edited photos and videos. She waved cheerfully, pushing up her red-framed glasses. Sean was taken aback. She wasn't so intimidating after all. They met Stella and Jessica by the fountain. It was dry for the winter, but the surrounding flower beds were still lush. Stella was convinced Jessica's anxiety stemmed from a lack of exercise. Working hard wasn't the same as working out. So, she dragged her out of bed. Jessica felt like Stella wasn't training a person, but a donkey, dangling a carrot she was trying desperately not to eat. Still, she couldn't bear to disappoint Stella, and a part of her was happy to be there. At least this time, she had proper running shoes and wouldn't have to suffer the embarrassment of a sole falling off mid-run. With Sean filming, Stella let Leo run ahead while she stayed back to jog at a slower pace with Jessica. Sean filmed the entire run, capturing different angles, lighting, and backgrounds to give himself plenty of options in the edit. Running footage was always great for B-roll. It had an energetic, aspirational feel, especially at dawn when the campus was empty. Leo stuck to his steady pace, not changing his routine for the camera. That was the key to his TikTok's sustainability. It didn't negatively impact his real life. He wasn't held captive by his followers' opinions. In the past, he might have cared what people thought, but with his increased intelligence, his way of thinking had shifted. He was more direct, more clear-headed. He knew how to shut out the noise. Running felt like a morning ritual, a process of waking up his body and mind. He had to be outdoors, feeling the ground beneath his feet, breathing fresh air. Running on a treadmill in the hotel in D.C. just wasn't the same. That was exercise for the body, but not for the soul. Running outside, you could feel the earth's pulse sync up with its rhythm. Stella's form was perfect, her breathing steady. Her father had hired a professional runner to train her. He didn't just spend money on the necessities. He spent it on the handle, the hilt, and the scabbard, too. He was thorough. Jessica's running form had been trained by her father, too, in a crueler way. When he beat her, she ran. She ran as fast as she could, circling the entire town, holding her breath, knowing that if she wasn't fast enough, the beating would be worse. Today, following the techniques Leo had taught her, she ran slowly, focusing on her breath. For the first time, the sharp pain in her lower right side didn't appear. After a satisfying run, they all went for breakfast. The legendary local breakfast burrito was a must, but donuts and coffee were also tempting. They decided to get both. Sean went to grab the burritos while the others went to the donut shop. As an adult, you could have it all. Leo watched the owner expertly knead the dough, twist it into shape, and drop it into the hot oil. The pale dough slowly turned golden, floating and tumbling until it was fished out and placed on a wire rack to drain. The owner was focused, content in his repetition. Watching him, Leo found the answer to his dilemma. There was no need to be obsessed with the future. As long as you were dedicated to what you were doing in the present, enjoying the process, that was enough. Repetition wasn't necessarily bad. Innovation wasn't necessarily good. Simply making honest, traditional food was a worthy thing in itself. The donuts were incredible. After they finished, as they walked back, the system's mechanical voice sounded in his head. Congratulations, host, for passing the trial of tedious, repetitive work. Life is rarely new, is mostly day after day. To live well in the present is the greatest success. You are rewarded with an intermediate level item. When you cook a dish with heart, those who eat it will feel a sense of joy, for you have transmitted your happy and earnest attitude toward life. Leo sighed. Great. Is the system dead set on making me a master chef? The requirements for this whole trophy husband gig are getting ridiculously high. My culinary skills are about to be maxed out. After their run and breakfast, they felt energized and satisfied. Many students were just rolling out of bed, rushing to class, or grabbing a quick bite from the student strip. Leo felt a smug sense of superiority. He'd already lived several more hours than they had today. The secret thrill of the overachiever. Stella and Jessica walking together had become a common sight on campus. One was cool and aloof, the other gentle. One had short hair, the other super long hair. The height difference was even kind of cute. Sometimes, seeing them together, Leo felt like a third wheel. As the shippers would say, Stella had serious top energy. She was beautiful, but in a more androgynous, intimidating way. You didn't look at her and have dirty thoughts. You wouldn't dare. But Leo dared. He'd had a taste, and it was exquisite. He playfully grumbled to himself that Jessica was being manipulative, always clinging to Stella in front of him, as if staking her claim. Sometimes, he thought, best friends were a menace. Jessica's internal monologue. Good grief, you two are ridiculous. If I don't cling to her, am I supposed to cling to you? Leo had become something of a celebrity on campus. It wasn't just the TikTok fame. The university's official website had even featured him in a very positive story. He was a different kind of influencer. No pranks, no flaunting wealth, no bizarre history. He was just like any other student, ordinary yet full of charm, which made him feel relatable. He was the handsome upperclassman everyone felt they could be if they just tried hard enough. Then there was the mysterious cameraman. He never showed his face in the videos, and even in real life, it was hard to get a good look at him. He was either hidden behind the camera or looking down, seeming to naturally avoid eye contact. Sean would have just said, maybe it's because I'm shy. A certain contingent of underclassmen had even started shipping Leo and his cameraman, writing fanfiction in their dorm rooms about their beautiful, creative partnership. Leo's response, I have a girlfriend. Sean's response, I like curvy women. Back in the dorm, Jordan was still gaming. Alex had already left for the day. Sean handed Jordan his breakfast and then settled in to start editing. Leo, meanwhile, was heading to the art studio. His godfather, Dr. Shun, had seen the questions Leo had sent over and was worried he was learning too much, too fast. He had called the day before, urging him to slow down, to rest. Your progress is already incredibly fast, he'd said. Just stabilize for a bit. The truth was, Director Shun himself had been swamped lately. He was carving out time to answer his godson's questions, which was exhausting. Since returning from the capital, the hospital was undergoing an expansion. While others handled the day-to-day, a high-level official had suddenly summoned him for a wellness checkup. He normally only tended to retired officials, never wanted to get entangled in the politics of those still in office. But after his trip to D.C., his status had inexplicably risen. His daughter said he'd leveled up. Dr. Shun could only marvel at his luck. He'd been blessed with patrons his whole life, his great-aunt when he was young, and now his godson, Leo, in his old age. His medical skills hadn't magically improved overnight. Medicine was a practice, not something you could fake. But luck played a part. The legendary stories of great doctors were always tied to powerful figures. Curing an ordinary person was noble, but it didn't make headlines. He had initially taken Leo on his rounds to introduce the boy to some influential people, a selfish act on his part. He never imagined that he would be the one getting a boost. Leo had recommended his mindful restoration technique to a top official, and suddenly Dr. Shun found himself in the orbit of D.C.'s elite. Then, because of Leo's discovery of the ancient medical Buddha statue, even the flight back had felt different. Things hadn't settled down since. He'd barely had a day's rest before being called away again. Before, even within his own state, he wasn't a particularly prominent figure among the top doctors. But after one conference in the capital, he was suddenly being pushed to the front of every consultation. At first, he was paranoid, thinking someone was setting him up to fail. But everyone was exceedingly polite, praising him lavishly. Even the officials were warm and friendly. He sensed a profound shift. He had thought that being a hospital director was the pinnacle of his career, but he was now realizing that in terms of real influence, he was just getting started. Even his daughter, Shelley, had called. Her bosses at the pharmaceutical company were moving her to a new, easier position with a higher salary, a promotion. His wife, Grace, had noticed it too. She'd run into an official's wife while shopping, someone who used to give her a polite nod, who now insisted they shop and have tea together. Dr. Shun knew the reason for all of this was his godson. A rising tide lifts all boats. He was now on the radar of the D.C. elite, which naturally elevated his status back home. So, he cared even more about what Leo was doing. He was concerned not just about his studies, but his health. When he heard Leo was interested in cooking and had taken over the restaurant, he thought it was a great idea. In traditional medicine, Food and medicine were inseparable. Eating well was a form of treatment. Along with answering Leo's medical questions, Dr. Shin wrote down several of his own culinary tonic recipes. Simple, everyday dishes made with inexpensive but effective ingredients. True nourishment didn't require deer antlers and aged ginseng. Most people couldn't handle such potent remedies anyway. Modern life, with its stress and lack of sleep, left people drained. It wasn't just middle-aged people. Many in their 20s felt this way. The best cure was to start with the gut. Dr. Shin worried his godson was working too hard. The amount he was studying was staggering. Early that morning, just before a meeting, he decided to call. "It's getting cold. You need to take care of yourself," he said. "Pace yourself. Don't study too hard. By the way, I had your godmother send you a batch of medicinal herbs for your culinary tonics." Dr. Shin, being the director of a major medical center and a shareholder in pharmaceutical companies, was an expert on the sources of traditional herbs. He personally favored those from the highlands of the American Northwest, where he traveled every year to inspect the land and purchase a private supply of the highest quality, organically grown herbs. Leo had been worried Dr. Shin would scold him for getting distracted with the restaurant. Instead, he was getting a delivery of premium ingredients. "Thank you, Godfather. You take care of yourself, too. I'll learn how to make the tonics properly, and next time I'll make one for you." Dr. Shin couldn't help but smile, completely hooked by that one sentence. His own daughter was a pro at asking for money, but his godson was something else entirely. Down the hall, a group of deputy directors and department heads watched their boss on the phone, a gentle, lovesick expression on his face, and thought he was talking to his secret lover. Leo felt he should be obedient, so instead of heading to the study hall, he went to the art studio. He had 2 paintings to finish. One was the commission Dr. Croft had arranged, which was also a homework assignment, and the other was General Ingram's portrait. He had met the general in person, and while the memory was still fresh, he wanted to start on his portrait. He had photos too, but sifting through his camera roll was a pain. His social media feed was actually the most practical place to store pictures. It felt like it had been a while since he last painted. His hands felt rusty. True mastery in anything required constant practice. He opened the windows, tidied up the space, and then, mimicking Professor Reed, did a series of vigorous stretches, slapping his arms and legs to clear his mind. He put on some music and finally settled down to paint. The prep work took time, but once he was truly immersed, the hours flew by. His phone was tossed to the side, so he missed the text from Dylan Sloan and the flurry of messages in the group chat. Hannah Chun had gone to the restaurant early that morning. According to its Yelp page, they opened for calls at 10 a.m. The phone started ringing off the hook with reservation requests. Hannah methodically organized the bookings, table by table. Incredibly, they were already booked out for the next 3 days. The remaining chef and server were stunned. Had they become this popular overnight? The new young boss had been here for 3 days, and each day had been busier than the last. Now they were fully booked. They were overjoyed. Their contracts included bonuses for exceeding certain revenue targets, bonuses they had never once received under the previous owner. Suddenly, they felt a jolt of adrenaline. Chef Wu, in particular, was ecstatic. He discovered the young boss was willing to teach, holding nothing back. He felt like he had stumbled upon the opportunity of a lifetime. He was determined to serve his new boss well, to learn everything he could. With the young boss's talent, even learning a fraction of it would set him up for life. Besides, the boss's friends were all impressive, capable people who weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. The old owner's friends were all arrogant rich kids who looked down on them. Chef Wu had seen Leo's TikTok. He knew this kid was going places. Leo, meanwhile, was lost in the world of his painting. He found he could channel his visualization ability into his art, and with the time dilation buff active, his inspiration flowed uninterrupted. He had an old favorite song playing on a loop, a soulful indie cover of You Are My Eyes. It was the perfect background music for creation. As he worked, the sunlight crept across the floor from his feet to the windowsill. He hadn't been this focused on a single task, alone for a long time. When he finally felt the first draft was complete, he stood up and felt a dull ache in his lower back. On the canvas, the general spirit was already taking shape. There was a sense of world weariness, of pain from battling illness, but it all resolved into a look of peaceful acceptance. His iron will have been spent on his enemies and the passage of time. The last of his tenderness was reserved for the present, for the younger generation. It was a portrait of a tough man's gentle hope. The soul of the painting was there, but the effort had completely drained him. He felt a ravenous hunger. He scrambled for his backpack, pulling out a yogurt and some random snacks, and shoved them into his mouth, trying to quell the feeling of depletion. Leaning back on the sofa, he finally checked his phone and saw the mountain of messages. The group chat now included Hannah, and she had updated them on the reservation situation. Everyone was buzzing. It was only then that he saw the message from Dylan Sloan. It took him a moment to place the name, the owner of the horse ranch in D.C. He was in town and wanted to treat him to dinner. Having received no reply, a mortified Dylan had gone with his local contact, Levi, to take care of the horse ranch business. Levi was reliable. When Dylan got in the car, he told him about the embarrassing blunder with the restaurant reservation. Levi laughed. Well, you picked the right place at least. That restaurant belongs to Leo. The word is his cooking is legendary. It's true you can't get a table. Levi had heard the story from Kyle Jennings, who had heard it from a complaining Carter Hayes. The restaurant had never once been fully booked under Carter's ownership. But the moment Leo took over, it was impossible to get in. Carter had assumed Leo was just using his TikTok fame to drive traffic, but the truth was more interesting. The rumor mill, a garbled mix of fact and fiction, claimed Leo was a master chef from a family of imperial cooks, that his food had been praised by the legendary Judge Cole, that his culinary tonics were magical, his steamed fish was a revelation, his hot sauce was unforgettable, his sponge cake would make you cry with joy, and his milk tea could instantly lift your spirits. Levi relayed the gist of it to Dylan. Dylan slapped his thigh. Of course, Liam Ingram had wanted to thank Leo because of his incredible medical skills. And wasn't Leo's godfather some master of traditional medicine? It was all connected. This kid was some kind of prodigy. So, he was trying to treat Leo to a meal at Leo's own restaurant, where Leo himself would be cooking. Leo's probably just having some fun with the place, Levi said. I hear his roommates are helping him out, but if you want to see him, you could join them for their late-night staff meal. They eat around 9 or 10. He should be free then. Perfect, Dylan said, thinking of his former, competent assistant. You never appreciate what you have until it's gone. Just then his phone rang. It was Leo. Feeling it was basic courtesy to return the call, Leo had dialed him back. Dylan answered, immediately apologizing. I had no idea that was your restaurant. It's so popular my assistant couldn't get a table. Leo chuckled at the mix-up, explaining that he was indeed swamped in the evening. Dylan then proposed crashing their late-night meal. Leo readily agreed. The guy had come all the way from D.C., and he had been a gracious host at the ranch. It was only right to return the favor. Sound good, Leo said. By the way, any allergies or anything you'd like me to make for you, Dylan? Dylan was pleasantly surprised by his sincerity and humility. Anything is fine. I love fish, and I hear yours is amazing. I'll take whatever I can get. He mentioned he'd be bringing a friend. Leo told him it was no problem. After hanging up, Leo realized he had 2 more mouths to feed that night. Walking out of the studio, Leo was momentarily blinded by the bright sunlight. He squinted, letting his eyes adjust. When you were immersed in something, time seemed to vanish. But as soon as you mastered your time, you realized your body had its limits. Feeling a bit drained, he started walking back. On the way, he got a call from Mr. Lou, Stella's assistant, saying he was coming to pick him up. Leo was surprised. The first time they'd met, Mr. Lou had seemed intense, almost intimidating, like a cunning business genius from a TV show who only had eyes for his boss. Now, he was being surprisingly courteous. My car's parked over the restaurant, Leo said. The quality of cars parked at the restaurant had certainly changed since Carter Hayes left. The multi-$100,000 G-Wagon had been replaced by a Rivian. Mr. Lou pulled up in his own car, a Volvo, for which he already had a campus parking permit. He explained warmly that Leo's roommates were already at the restaurant, and knowing Leo was busy, he had come to get him. Leo, having been alone and silent for what felt like 2 days thanks to his buff, was actually in the mood to talk. He complimented Mr. Lou on his smooth driving. Mr. Lou beamed, explaining the car was a bonus from his boss for being Employee of the Year. Wow, your boss is really generous, Leo said, and the two fell into an easy conversation about cars. It was a classic topic for guys. Leo mentioned riding in the G-Wagon in D.C. How cool it looked, but how uncomfortable the ride was. He also recalled the time he'd been in a Maybach and couldn't figure out how to open the door, a slightly embarrassing memory. So, what's your favorite car, Leo? Mr. Lou asked. Leo thought for a moment. A Rolls-Royce Cullinan. That thing looks incredible. Mr. Lou mentally filed the information away. A future report from Mr. Vance. Sir, your son-in-law is currently in need of one vehicle. Mr. Vance's internal monologue. Is that what I sent you there to do? Get out. It was a short drive. Mr. Lou made a mental note to find more opportunities to chat with the young boss, to learn his preferences. Making sure his boss and future son-in-law got along would be a major feather in his cap. Perhaps it would even earn him another car. When they arrived at the restaurant, it was a hive of activity. Jordan, who usually spent his days looking disheveled in the dorm, was cleaned up and looking surprisingly professional in an apron, playing the part of a portly barista. Hannah was deftly managing the front of the house, while Alex, dressed impeccably, exuded the air of sophisticated butler, lending the whole place an upscale vibe just by walking around. Sean was holed up in the office, editing the footage he'd captured over the past 2 days. The restaurant videos were a hit, attracting a new wave of followers. The account had inexplicably surged past 6 million. Stella wasn't there today. She was out with Jessica. That was fine with Leo. It meant fewer distractions. Besides, he needed to prepare for Professor Reed's visit that evening. He arrived just in time for the staff lunch, cooked by Chef Wu. The chef watched him nervously, waiting for a verdict, notepad in hand. Wu, a 48-year-old man, had shamelessly started calling the college-aged Leo master and teacher. Leo was a bit embarrassed, but could see the man was genuinely eager to learn. He offered his critiques, pointing out subtle nuances that only his buff-enhanced palate could detect. Chef Wu was increasingly impressed. The master's palate was on another level, like a professional food critic's. Alex, however, suspected Leo was just playing a role. He'd seen Leo happily devour cheap food from the student strip and the cafeteria without a single complaint. Here, he was being meticulous and serious. It was a lesson in leadership, Alex realized. Leo was relaxed with his friends, but he maintained a professional distance with his employees. It was a fine line to walk. "You eat too," Leo said to Chef Wu, noticing his food was getting cold. "You made a lot of progress today. The temperature on this stir-fry is perfect. The vegetables are sweet and crisp." The praise made Chef Wu light up. "I rendered the fat from some heritage pork to make lard for this," he said proudly. "And the vegetables are from a local farmer. I was careful to pull them from the heat right when they were done, letting the residual heat finish the cooking to keep them green." After a quick lunch, Leo thanked everyone for their hard work. "No problem, boss," they all laughed. "As long as you keep the late-night meals coming." Mr. Lou made another mental note. The young boss has excellent rapport with his staff. Management skills are strong. After lunch, the staff took a short break. Leo lay down on the sofa in the office. The previous owner had good taste. The sofa was incredibly comfortable, made of a firm memory foam. Jordan had mentioned it was an Italian import that cost a small fortune. Leo covered himself with the Hermes throw blanket Stella had given him and was asleep in seconds. Sean, seeing how exhausted he was, quietly turned up the thermostat. Meanwhile, Alex sat on the office balcony, enjoying the view and rereading his favorite political novel, The Sentinel's Watch. He found new insights every time he read it. After a while, the cold drove him back inside. Seeing Leo asleep and Sean working, he went downstairs to chat with Jordan and the rest of the staff, effortlessly gathering intel on everyone's life story. Leo woke up from his nap feeling refreshed, his mind clear. He changed into a comfortable set of clothes for kitchen work. The small ensuite bathroom in the office was a convenient luxury. He made a mental note to invite Professor Hoffman for dinner soon. It seemed only right since Professor Reed was coming. He should probably invite Ms. Miller and Dean Roberts, too. He was still pondering the logistics when a message popped up in his group chat with Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole. "Professor Hoffman, heard you opened a private kitchen that's impossible to get into. You're really something, kid. Whatever you do it right." Judge Cole, who had been reminiscing about the fish Leo had cooked, chimed in with an emoji, signaling he was paying attention. Leo replied immediately, "We're just booked up because we're short-staffed and still getting the hang of things. Of course, there's always room for you and Judge Cole. Just let me know when you'd like to come." "Professor Hoffman, I'm free this afternoon. Your godmother happens to be home today, too." "Judge Cole, I'm retired. I have nothing but time." "All right then," Leo typed. "Tonight it is. It'll be a good test of my hosting skills. I'll send you the address." He informed Hannah that he had just added 2 more tables for the evening. She asked for details on the guests so she could prepare. "One table is for my calculus professor, Evelyn Reed, a retired professor from Caltech," Leo explained. "She's health conscious. One of her friends is Dr. Sterling, the tea expert, so he'll have high standards. Grab some of the good tea from upstairs for any special guests. I don't know her other friend, but they'll likely be older, so plan accordingly." Hannah nodded, taking notes. "The other table is for Professor Hoffman," Leo continued. "His wife, the director Penelope Hayes, will be with him. She likes spicy food. And with them is Judge Cole. He's a very important retired official, higher ranking than our university president, so we need to be discreet. No photos. Have Alex handle their table, or the 2 of you can do it together." He paused, then slapped his forehead. "Oh, and 2 friends are coming for the late-night meal. One is from D.C. and likes fish. The other is a local guy." Hannah took it all in stride and went to plan the menus. Leo was just glad he made a big batch of hot sauce. After giving his instructions, he headed to the kitchen. Sean followed, camera in hand, ready to document the authentic, unscripted process of a master at work. As he began to cook, a sense of calm settled over Leo. With the menu already set, he could work with purpose. Chef Wu came over, eager to learn how he planned the courses. Wu had taken it upon himself to go to the market that morning, meticulously selecting the freshest ingredients. He knew that a diligent employee who showed initiative would be noticed by a pragmatic boss like Leo. There's an art to picking cabbage, Wu explained, holding up two heads. The bright green ones look nice, but they're watery and tasteless. These darker, thicker ones will be fragrant and sweet when you cook them. He proudly showed off the wild-caught shrimp, the fresh winter bamboo shoots, and a live rooster with brilliant plumage. With ingredients this good, he could elevate his own 7.5 out of 10 cooking to a solid 8. Leo listened, his mind working on the menu. His specialties were still limited: steamed fish, hot sauce, sponge cake, milk tea, and culinary tonics. But his father had supported their family his whole life with a single braised pork recipe. With his current repertoire, he was already ahead of the game. He asked Chef Wu to teach him how to make a simple white rice porridge, knowing Professor Reed might want something light. Wu, assuming the young boss was just testing him, launched into a detailed explanation, holding nothing back. Leo learned patiently, absorbing the nuances of rinsing the rice, the water-to-rice ratio, and controlling the heat. The afternoon in the kitchen flew by. He prepped the ingredients for the culinary tonics, then moved to the coffee bar to make the sponge cake and milk tea. He experimented with different teas, settling on a bamboo leaf dancong oolong, whose clean, sweet notes paired perfectly with fresh milk. The aroma of baking cake filled the air just as Paige Kennedy and her roommates arrived. She had seen on TikTok that Leo was working at the restaurant and, assuming he was in financial trouble, had rushed over to offer help. "What are you doing?" she demanded, marching up to him. She was dressed in a tight-knit top and baggy jeans, her midriff bare despite the winter chill. "You can be my co-host. I'll give you all the money for my streams, so you don't have to work in a kitchen." Leo sighed. "Good Lord, here we go." "Paige, relax," Leo said, looking at his well-meaning but chaotic friend. "I'm working. It's my job. What can I get for you guys? It's on the house." Paige wasn't having it, playfully punching his arm. Her affection had always been expressed with the subtlety of Moose the golden retriever, which was probably why Leo had never picked up on her crush. Hannah deftly intervened, guiding Paige and her friends to a table with perfect lighting. "This spot is great for photos," she said, snapping a quick picture of them that was instantly flattering. Paige's attention was immediately diverted as she and her friends started posing for selfies. Hannah had a server bring them fresh milk tea and warm sponge cake. Paige had been to this restaurant before and found it mediocre. But today, the milk tea was sweet and fragrant, and the simple sponge cake was moist and delicious. She was a professional snacker, and her job was starting to kill her appetite. But this was different. She ate with such gusto that her eyes lit up. Her roommates started filming her. Forgetting her mission to rescue Leo from poverty, she bounced back to the counter, demanding more cake. Leo watched her, amused. She looked exactly like Moose begging for a treat. Later that afternoon, Levi hosted Dylan for a respectable but brief lunch before taking him to see the horse ranch. It was a fantastic property, nearly as large as his one in D.C., but for a fraction of the price. "It's a fire sale," Levi explained. "The owner is a washout who needs cash for his next failed venture. If you want, you can even buy the adjacent plot with that beautiful patch of woods." They sorted out the initial details, and by the time they were done, it was getting dark. Dylan declined Levi's offer of dinner, eager to meet Leo. As they drove onto the Northwood State campus, Dylan noticed a large red banner stretched across a building. He was taking a sip of water when he read the words, "An hour of exercise a day keeps the doctor away for life." He choked, spraying water all over the dashboard. The leadership at this school was something else. Professor Reed arrived early with her friends, Dr. Sterling and Lynn Chapman, a neighbor she hadn't seen in over 40 years. The reunion was bittersweet. Lynn, who had endured a difficult life, looked much older than her years. Dr. Sterling, dapper as ever in a beret and trench coat, was a world traveler and a notorious tea snob. He rarely drank the tea served in restaurants, but the brew Hannah served them was surprisingly fragrant and complex. He was impressed. As they reminisced, the food began to arrive. Leo had prepared a simple menu: a comforting vegetable and rice soup, the now famous steamed fish, and a culinary tonic made with chicken broth. Lynn, who usually had a poor appetite due to her low spirits, found herself eating with unexpected enthusiasm. Each dish was delicious, and the warm soup soothed her. Dr. Sterling, a connoisseur of both tea and food, was equally impressed. Leo came out with dessert, sponge cake, and milk tea. Dr. Sterling only then realized this was a student's restaurant. "What a waste of talent," he exclaimed dramatically. "A level 1 national tea master, and you're in a kitchen." Leo just smiled. "Professor, I enjoy the process of cooking. Seeing guests enjoy the food gives me the same satisfaction as brewing a perfect cup of tea. I feel like I've hit a plateau with tea, so I wanted to try something new." Dr. Sterling was humbled by the boy's sincerity. A little later, Professor Hoffman and Penelope Hayes arrived with Judge Cole and his daughter, Miranda. Miranda, a high-level bank executive, was annoyed at being dragged to a student-run restaurant, but the quiet professional service and excellent tea began to win her over. Then came the food. She started with a small bowl of the chicken soup. One sip, and her eyes widened. It was the most exquisitely flavorful broth she had ever tasted, with a subtle herbal note that was both complex and comforting. The fish, a common freshwater variety she usually disliked, was sweet and succulent, with no hint of muddiness. When she dipped a piece into the house-made hot sauce, her carefully constructed composure shattered. An explosion of flavor rocked her palate. Her face, usually a mask of professional seriousness, became a canvas of pure, unadulterated pleasure. "So this is why Dad insisted on coming," she thought. "The old man has been eating like a king." Judge Cole watched his daughter's reaction with smug satisfaction. Leo came to their table to deliver the sponge cake. "You're a real prodigy, kid," Professor Hoffman said, clapping him on the shoulder. "This meal was so good, I don't think I'll want to eat for days." "I'm just glad you all enjoyed it," Leo said politely. "Food can convey emotions. When I'm happy cooking, I hope the people eating feel it too." Miranda laughed, charmed by his earnestness. "You're too sweet. Call me Miranda." After Leo had left their table, the system's notifications rang in his head like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. "Congratulations, host, for successfully captivating a diamond-tier single man, Judge Sanford Cole. Favorability has reached 74. You have received his sincere blessing. Reward: intermediate food enhancement item. All of the host's signature dishes have been upgraded by 1 level. Reward: lifespan +1. Please continue your efforts and strive for new heights." People are always exceptionally humble, almost fawning toward those in power. It's simple pragmatism. There's real profit in it. Leo, for instance, felt a completely genuine reverence for Judge Cole. He glanced at his own stats panel, at the line item for his lifespan. Lifespan, 21/71. 1/110. Current age / projected lifespan / max lifespan. Another year of life, just like that. At the current retirement age of 67, he'd still have 1 years to play. That is, if he didn't keep extending it. So many people put things off, thinking, when I retire, I'll finally have the time and money to do X, Y, and Z. But the reality was, by the time you retired, you couldn't even handle an all-you-can-eat buffet anymore. Your stomach couldn't take it. What a waste. Forget traveling the world. A single long-haul flight could feel like a death sentence. When you were young, you could endure a 36-hour bus ride in a cramped seat. When you were old, 2 hours in first class had you feeling for the oxygen mask. Whatever you want to do, you have to do it now. And forget about finding some young thing to travel with after retirement. Most guys couldn't handle it. You'd be leaning on a 10-pound cane with one hand, trying to support a 100-something-pound woman with the other. Not happening. Leo felt the added year of life course through him like a surge of vitality, bringing him one step closer to Professor Reed's seemingly endless energy. Some fan on the author's blog said they hoped Leo and Professor Reed would end up together. "You'll ship anything, won't you?" I guess that's one way to get a balanced diet. Every gift from Judge Cole felt monumental. With another upgrade to his culinary skill, Leo couldn't even imagine how good his steamed fish would taste now. He stared dumbly at his stats panel, and the adults at the table simply assumed he was a shy, quiet young man. Jonathan Cole had been deeply worried about his father being taken for a ride. Even though the old man had been 100 times sharper than him in his prime, when people got old, their children started to worry. It was like the farmer parents who'd spent their lives tilling the soil. Even if their son became a multimillionaire, they'd still fret that he wasn't eating right or that he'd get scammed. It was an emotional inertia that was hard to shake. This was the first time Jonathan had met Leo in person. He'd heard the stories from his father, a young man who could brew a perfect cup of tea, who could paint, who could fish, who had sent over some custom herbal tonics, and who had a brilliant traditional doctor as a godfather. Jonathan had pictured someone slick and polished, a social butterfly who knew how to work a room. He hadn't expected to meet a young man with such a pleasant voice, a touch of bashfulness, and an aura of profound steadiness. You can be a flighty person and cook well. His sister, Miranda, was proof of that. She had no patience for the kitchen, always feeling clumsy and out of place. She could burn toast. Of course, she loved to eat. Everyone had an appetite for good food. But someone who could personally create truly delicious food must have a sincere heart. Of course, his good looks helped. If a 300-pound chef made the same dish, you wouldn't call him sincere. You'd use other adjectives. All in all, Jonathan had a wonderful dinner. It was rare for him to spend time with his father without them butting heads. The conversation was relaxed. He found Professor Hoffman and his wife, Penelope, to be fascinating people. It was a social setting completely removed from his work, and it was effortless. And the young chef was easy on the eyes and spoke beautifully. Even Miranda Cole, a woman twice divorced and notoriously critical, was sending off positive vibes. A mechanical voice sounded in Leo's mind. Congratulations, host, on your highly effective progress with the gold-tier single woman, Miranda Cole. Favorability has reached 70. Please continue your efforts and strive for new heights. Target, Miranda Cole age, 42 assets, redacted education, upper tier, 74, appearance, upper tier, 79. Leo found it strange. It made sense for Judge Cole's assets to be redacted, but hers too? Was her wealth really that difficult to calculate? Her appearance score, however, was exceptionally high. He hadn't dared to stare at an elder when he first came in, but hearing the system's glowing review, he couldn't help but sneak a glance. Miranda, or Aunt Miranda, as he should probably think of her, had her hair cut in a bob that was slightly longer than a TV anchor's, styled with soft, subtle waves. She was dressed professionally in a black blazer and matching skirt, giving her a sharp, formidable air. But her features were undeniably beautiful, reminiscent of that tech heiress from a Vanity Fair profile who'd had that famously messy divorce. Judge Cole was a handsome man even in his old age. It was only natural his daughter would inherit his good looks. Leo chatted with him for a little while longer before Alex, acting as a waiter, brought out small bags of the chicken cake and hot sauce, one for each of the guests. This place just changed hands, Leo explained, gesturing to his roommate. This is my friend Alex Young. He's helping me out. Judge Cole and Professor Hoffman both smiled, remembering him from their last meal together. Jonathan was just now realizing this was one of Leo's classmates. Alex greeted everyone, calm and composed, and delivered the food before retreating. In the end, Jonathan insisted on paying. Professor Hoffman didn't argue, just chuckled. Well, that's fantastic. We got to freeload a spectacular meal off Director Cole tonight. Leo didn't protest either. The kind of goodwill you built with people like this couldn't be bought with a single meal. Letting them pay made things simpler. Besides, for accounting purposes, he'd adopted a clear policy. Even the owner pays. When Paige had brought her roommates for afternoon tea, Leo had paid for it. That way, the book stayed clean, unlike the previous owners, whose 3 accountants couldn't figure out the mess of personal expenses mixed with business costs. After saying his goodbyes, Leo slipped out with Alex, leaving the adults to their conversation. Professor Reed was about to leave, and Leo needed to see her off. Alex, in his self-appointed role as logistics manager, had it covered. On his first day, he'd already compiled a list of reliable drivers with clean, comfortable cars ready to be called for guests. A car was arranged for Professor Reed's neighbor, Lynn. Dr. Lee was going to walk Professor Reed back to faculty housing, so they left them to it. That meal had been on Professor Reed's tab. People of their stature didn't accept favors over trivial things like dinner. They didn't stoop to nickel-and-diming. Meanwhile, Dylan Sloan and Levi had arrived on campus. Levi was keeping a low profile, driving a standard black executive sedan that blended in perfectly. He was here on business, not to show off. He understood the difference. Young people, after graduation, often develop a nostalgic fondness for their university. When you're a student, you can't wait to get out, convinced campus life is boring. But once you're gone, every visit back stirs something in you. You subconsciously search for your past self in the faces of the current students. Dylan had traveled all the way from D.C., and the journey had been grueling. The old Dylan Sloan would have had a fleet of cars from the local government office waiting for him, causing a scene all the way to the city's best hotel and fanciest restaurant. Play first, business later. But having witnessed his family's empire crumble, he was a changed man. His head was screwed on straight now. Before, it had been floating in the clouds. Looking back at his past self was like watching a movie of a decadent, dreamlike existence. He felt a strange sense of relief. Honestly, When he remembered how arrogant he used to be, he shuddered. A little more of that, and he might have ended up eating a bullet. In a way, it had been a blessing in disguise. He'd hit the brakes just in time. His life had been absurd, but at least he hadn't done anything truly depraved, hadn't crossed any lines he couldn't uncross. But he had been so inflated with his own importance back then that it was only a matter of time. The recent hardships had humbled him, grounded him. He knew it was what now? It wasn't all bad. As he and Levi walked onto the campus of Northwood State University, Dylan was struck by how beautiful the grounds were, almost like a scenic park. Driving onto the campus seemed to quiet his mind. He'd even looked at the university online and saw Leo's name proudly displayed on the official student website. The kid was a Bridgewater Fellow. A good kid, a promising kid, the kind who aligns himself with the establishment. Dylan thought back to his own reckless youth, the way he treated people as disposable, and a wave of fear washed over him. Levi guided him on a stroll around campus as dusk settled. He had been worried that Dylan would be annoyed at the lack of a dinner reservation, that he'd be angry about having to wander around and grab street food. But the man who had come from the capital was surprisingly grounded, a testament to his family's deep roots. He was low-key, humble, and all business. Dylan thought, you just never met the version of me that even my own dog would have disowned. Of course, Levi wasn't about to let him starve. He took him to the student strip for some food. It was cheap and the taste was mediocre, but it was vibrant. Standing in line with college students had a certain charm. They ambled slowly toward the private kitchen. That's when Levi saw Leo emerging from the restaurant, arm in arm with Judge Cole, laughing and chatting with Miranda and Jonathan Cole. A car was waiting. Leo saw them off, the picture of intimacy. Miranda Cole was a well-known figure in their circles. For one, there weren't many women who reached her executive level. For another, she'd been divorced twice. Her first marriage was to a college classmate, a doctor. It was a marriage of love. But Miranda was busy, and her husband was even busier. The official story was that they grew apart, but the whispers said he'd been having an affair. Being a public figure, Miranda didn't cause a scene. The divorce was handled with class. Before the split, her husband's career at the hospital had been on a fast track. He was climbing the ladder faster than any of his peers. Though no one would ever admit to pulling strings, when your father-in-law is a federal judge, you don't need to ask for the back door to be opened. The leadership builds one just for you. He became a department head at a ridiculously young age. His skills weren't the most outstanding, but his promotions were the fastest. He got every perk, every title. And then he got arrogant. He started to believe he'd earned it all on his own merit, forgetting the older, more qualified surgeons he'd leapfrogged. His career was soaring, and he found a new true love. Since they had a child together, the divorce remained civil. But everyone who needed to know knew. The guy was something else, bravely pursuing love while married into a family like that. Soon after the divorce, a convenient mistake saw him removed from his position as department head. He eventually transferred hospitals. His career had peaked. It was all downhill from there. But a woman as striking and well-connected as Miranda didn't lack for suitors. She remarried quickly. Her second husband was a wealthy businessman who pursued her with a passion that made up for all the first one's shortcomings. He had family money. He wasn't as busy. He was romantic, and he doted on her. The second divorce came when Miranda discovered his family was using her name to pull strings and engage in some shady business dealings. She cut ties immediately. She might have a soft spot for romance, but if her personal life threatened to drag down her father or her brother, she knew how to cut her losses before it was too late. To his credit, the second husband didn't dare cross her. They also had a child together, and he still had to operate in the same city. At the time, he'd been furious, accusing her of using her own family as a political stepping stone, of being cold-blooded. Her actions had cost his family a lucrative land deal they were about to pour millions into for a new industrial park. But businessmen are smart. He agreed to a generous divorce settlement, splitting their assets cleanly down the middle. As it turned out, the subsequent commercial real estate crash would have wiped them out. Miranda's dramatic divorce had inadvertently saved his entire family. Their post-divorce relationship was actually better than their marriage. They were like old friends. The first ex-husband had become bitter because he had genuinely loved her. The second one hadn't. He'd simply handed over a large sum of money, a purely financial transaction. And so, Miranda Cole possessed immense, and more importantly, legally clean, assets. With her looks and position, anyone within the system knew who she was. As for Judge Cole, though retired, a man of his rank still held immense influence. As long as he was alive, his every move was watched. Levi's family was part of the city's old money, but they couldn't compare to the Coles. The Coles were top tier. Levi didn't dare approach them, even though he knew them. It was a private gathering. Interrupting would be rude and pointless. Dylan, however, noticed the shift in Levi's normally placid expression. He saw the shock. The group was too far away for him to clearly see who Leo was with. Just an old man and a couple of others. Being from D.C., Dylan wasn't familiar with the local power players and couldn't possibly recognize them by silhouette. He'd been a playboy, after all, propped up by a competent assistant. He turned to Levi. Levi realized his surprise had been too obvious. "Mr. Sloan," he explained, "I was just saying Leo was busy tonight. Turns out Miranda and Judge Cole were having dinner at his restaurant." Even with his political ignorance, the name Judge Cole finally clicked for Dylan. There weren't many federal judges of that stature, and even in retirement, they mattered as long as they were drawing breath. A part of him had been vaguely annoyed that Leo hadn't made time for him, despite his assistant's failure to make a reservation. But he had learned to manage his ego. He was here to offer a gift, to show sincerity, not to cause trouble. He hadn't realized Leo's connections ran this deep. It wasn't just about saving General Ingram's life. Leo clearly had other powerful relationships. Compared to someone like Judge Cole, a playboy on his last legs like himself was nothing. Levi's estimation of Leo shot up another 10 notches. He had suspected a connection to the judge, but he didn't trade in rumors. Now he'd seen it with his own eyes. A woman like Miranda Cole, twice divorced and reputedly hostile toward men, was acting so warmly toward Leo. It was clearly a genuine friendship, not the forced pleasantries of a business dinner. The comparison was brutal. This restaurant, opened by Carter Hayes, had been losing money. Leo takes over, and within days, Judge Cole and his daughter are dining there. Anyone with an ounce of sense who got wind of this would be lining up to get a table. And even without the Coles, he'd heard the place was already booked solid. Leo wasn't just coasting on connections. Word was he was in the kitchen, cooking himself. Sincere and capable. Who wouldn't like a guy like that? The two of them lingered for a bit longer before finally heading toward the entrance. After seeing off the Coles and the Hoffmans, Leo returned to the kitchen to continue his culinary experiments. He was itching to try out his newly enhanced skill. Everyone was waiting for the late-night meal, including his evening guests, the horse ranch owner from D.C., Dylan Sloan, and his friend, Levi. The city cultural promotion grant Sean had asked about was apparently a real thing. Sean said the guy wasn't just making empty promises at a dinner party. He'd actually followed through, sending over paperwork for Sean to fill out. Back in the kitchen, the remaining fish were small and bony, but they would have to do. He couldn't make more hot sauce from scratch tonight, but there was a little left over. He'd have to make a big batch tomorrow. As he was placing the fish in the steamer, Hannah-chun poked her head in to say his friends had arrived. Wiping his hands on his apron, Leo came out to greet them warmly. "Mr. Sloan, Levi, have a seat. Food will be ready in a minute." Dylan and Levi were almost taken aback by his enthusiasm, and they thanked him graciously. The restaurant was packed. The customers were there purely for the food, so the atmosphere was pleasant. You never knew what you'd get when you open a restaurant to the public. You'd get the full spectrum of humanity. Some people came looking for a flaw just to get a free meal. Others got drunk and belligerent. To run a successful business, especially a popular one, you needed to handle all sorts of people. And once money was involved, you needed some serious backing, or people would harass you until you couldn't operate. Carter Hayes had handled that side of things when he first opened the place, which was why he tried to get friendly with guys like Alex. It was just that Alex hadn't played along last time and had come to cause trouble instead. Leo hadn't yet faced any of that nonsense, partly because the handover had been so quick, and partly because any local troublemakers were probably still watching from the sidelines. After tonight, though, no one would dare to cause trouble he couldn't handle. In the kitchen, Chef Wu discovered a secret. The young boss was freakishly strong. It was a well-known fact that chefs needed muscle. The stereotype of the brawny, thick-necked chef existed for a reason. Tossing a heavy wok full of food over a high flame was harder than lifting weights. You had to be strong. Chef Wu had initially thought the boss, with his refined looks, probably relied on secret family recipes. But then he saw it. The assistant chef, Barry, needed to wipe under the massive ironwood butcher's block, a solid 50 or 60 pounds at least. The boss lifted it with one hand, so Barry could clean underneath. Later, when Leo was out front, Chef Wu snuck over and tried to lift it himself. It took both hands and a serious effort just to get it off the ground. The angle was all wrong for leverage. No wonder his old master always said they weren't strong enough. He thought it was just an excuse to make them do manual labor. Turns out it was true. Some people were also just born with a different touch. The vegetable and rice soup for the evening meal, The boss had made it while chatting with him, following his instructions to the letter. And yet, when Chef Wu tasted it, it was different. Identical steps, but the soup the boss made was somehow softer, smoother. It felt like it was softening his heart as he drank it. Of course, it wasn't some magical elixir. It was just vegetables and rice, but it was profoundly comforting. Chefs rarely have good appetites. You spend all day around sizzling pans and greasy fumes, tasting things here and there, and by the end of the day, you're too saturated to eat a proper meal. Yet you still get fat. It had been ages since Chef Wu had felt the desire for a second bowl of something so simple. A wave of pleasantness washed over him, and he worked with renewed vigor. He and the kitchen staff finished their tasks with meticulous care. The motivation was twofold: the promise of a good salary and the anticipation of their own late-night meal. But more than that, it was the owner's presence. The old boss never set foot in the kitchen. You could work your butt off or slack off, and he'd never know. With an owner who knew his way around a kitchen, no one dared to cut corners. It was the same out front. With the boss's classmates helping out, acting as his eyes and ears, the servers couldn't get away with the laziness of the past. Alex, Hannah, and Jessica were leading by example, showing the remaining staff the right way to do things. The few who had stayed were diligent and willing to learn. It wasn't calculus. All it took was a little effort. Dylan Sloan had never been to the restaurant before. Levi had been twice, but it felt completely different now. He'd heard Carter Hayes had taken nearly the entire staff with him, leaving only a few stragglers. Yet the place felt more orderly than ever. Before, servers were everywhere, some even playing on their phones in corners, but the service was still lacking. Now, everything was seamless. Each person had their role. They hadn't done any major hiring, but the few remaining employees had a completely different energy. The young woman who had seated them, Hannah, was efficient and professional, her smile perfectly pitched between warmth and respect. Then one of Leo's roommates came to take their order. Levi knew this was a kid with a serious political pedigree, whose father was a powerful and rising figure. And he was here, waiting tables. Levi didn't dare act superior, and Dylan certainly didn't. He had arrived with a bit of his D.C. superiority complex intact, but seeing the caliber of people Leo was hosting had quickly humbled him. Even when his own family was at its peak, he would have been at the very end of the table at a dinner with someone like Judge Cole. Now he saw another kid whose family was in politics, and another, the son of the CEO of a major American apparel company, manning the coffee bar. Dylan started to feel a little embarrassed just being there to eat and not pitch in. By now, the last of the dinner guests had left, but the staff was cleaning up in an orderly fashion. Alex and Jordan came over to chat with them, since they'd all met at the horse ranch. Sean, however, was in the kitchen, filming Leo prepare the fish. The work was repetitive, but with each shot, he discovered something new about the light, the angle, the movement. He wasn't a people person, so he avoided social situations when he could, focusing instead on the one thing he did well. Finally, it was time for their late-night meal. The staff ate at two separate tables so as not to crowd the boss and his guests. The menu was the same. There were no leftovers to give the employees. Every plate from every table had come back wiped clean. The four roommates sat with Dylan and Levi. The two guests had only had a small snack on the student strip and were starving. They hadn't come for the food. Dylan was there for Leo, and Levi was there to accompany Dylan. It was supposed to be a networking meal. But the moment they started eating, all thoughts of networking vanished. Chopsticks and spoons moved with a dizzying frequency. The only sound was the clatter of silverware against porcelain. There was no time to talk, especially that steamed fish. What magical species was this? Dylan had never tasted anything like it. The flesh was incredibly fresh, almost sweet, encased in the savory, salty flavor of the soy sauce. Dylan Sloan, A.D.C., playboy who once held a membership card to the most exclusive golf club in the country, found himself pouring the leftover sauce from the fish onto his rice. He devoured the entire bowl and was left wanting more. Dylan Sloan had always thought he didn't like rice, that he wasn't a carbs person. But tonight he'd polished off a whole bowl just because of the sauce, and he felt a little embarrassed looking at his clean plate. He looked like he'd been starving for days. Thankfully, everyone else was eating with the same intensity, so he didn't feel too out of place. Levi was eating with a focused, rapid grace. He maintained his table manners, but his movements were ruthlessly efficient. The meal wasn't a symphony of clinking glasses, but of colliding bowls and chopsticks. Honestly, Dylan couldn't remember the last time he'd been to a dinner that was just about dinner. Usually, meals were for networking, for closing a deal. No one's mind was on the food. But here, everyone was just eating for the pure joy of it. Even his family dinners were transactional, filled with hidden agendas and unspoken goals. Levi ate in silence, thinking, is this even the same restaurant? He'd been here twice when Carter Hayes was running it. What he'd eaten then was, in hindsight, garbage. He'd seen the world, eaten his share of fine dining, and had always considered himself disciplined, a man of refined and simple tastes. Now he realized he just hadn't encountered truly great food. When faced with something this good, his discipline evaporated. The flavors were explosive, savory, salty, spicy, delicious. Even a simple sponge cake, a dessert he'd normally skip, was perfectly balanced and not too sweet. He ate it in 3 bites, and for the first time he understood what his grandmother meant when she reminisced about the cakes of her childhood. It was a taste of pure satisfaction, as if his stomach had been abused for years and was finally being compensated. Even the culinary tonic, with its herbal notes, was incredible. He'd always hated the bitterness of traditional remedies, preferring a quick surgery to a slow course of medicinal teas. He was wrong. This wasn't bitter at all. It was delicious, the herbal aroma as subtle and complex as a fine cologne. He ate seriously, savoring every bite. He'd spent the day entertaining Mr. Sloan. It had been exhausting. Keeping someone else relaxed means you can never fully relax yourself. But this meal made it all worth it. The fatigue melted away. He felt like he'd just had a world-class foot massage for his stomach. He felt energized, ready to go clubbing all night. Dylan, too, was fully committed. If you didn't eat fast, you'd miss out. Leo ate with an elegant grace, but his speed was deceptive. Leo himself was blown away by the simple steamed fish. What was left over for their meal were just some small, bony panfish. He'd had the prep cook clean them, but he'd cooked them himself. With the added blessing from Judge Cole, he had no idea how they would turn out. His own steamed fish was already excellent, but this was on another level. It was a sublimation of flavor. Maybe the small, unknown fish had their own magic. They were bony, but the meat was exceptionally sweet and vibrant. It was the kind of bite that made you feel like you could die happy. It was a quantum leap, the difference between a pretty rock and a flawless 1-carat diamond. Even the sauce was so good that it transformed a simple bowl of rice into something sublime. The saucy rice slid down his throat and into his stomach, instantly becoming energy that radiated through his body. In short, Leo was fighting for a share too. If you're not passionate about eating, there's something wrong with your priorities. Hannah, reading the room, had moved over to the staff table, where she quickly fit right in. Not that they had much time for conversation either. The food was just too good. Chef Wu was eating so hard his eyes were watering. How could 2 people making the same dish produce such vastly different results? His heart ached, but his stomach rejoiced. His expression was a tragicomic mess, but it didn't slow down his chopsticks. The food was so good it made everything else taste better. The staff, all veterans of the restaurant industry, had never eaten anything this delicious. They worried about gaining weight, but they had to eat now and diet later. You couldn't lose weight on an empty stomach, after all. That was Hannah's philosophy. For a meal like this every night, she would work for free. She'd get a day job to pay her bills and then come here to volunteer. Her one weakness was good food. After a focused, silent, and deeply serious meal, the plates were clean. Everyone leaned back in their chairs, overcome with a pleasant lethargy. Dylan felt that if someone gave him a lounge chair and a toothpick right now, life would be perfect. But he remembered he was here for a reason. He brought up the ranch. Leo, he began back in D.C. You did me a huge favor introducing me to the Ingram family. I'm here to thank you. You mentioned you liked that bay stallion at my ranch. I had him shipped over. I took a look around today, and since it's not convenient to keep a horse on campus, I've arranged for a place for him. There's a ranch not far from here, about a 20-minute drive. Whenever you have time, you can go take a look and sign the transfer papers for the horse. And the ranch. Leo stared at him. He was serious? He just made an offhand comment about the horse being handsome. It was a magnificent animal, the embodiment of vitality and spirit. Is that the one named Monarch? Leo asked uncertainly. That's the one. He's a pure blood, internationally recognized. He's a bit high maintenance and needs a dedicated groom, but don't worry, he earns his own keep. Monarch's stud fee is around $600,000 per session, depending on his condition. He's already got a waiting list. They fly the Mares in. You won't have to worry about a thing. Leo was speechless. A horse that paid its own way through breeding. Was this a hardworking trophy stud? After the late-night meal, there was no after-party. Leo and his roommates had to get back to the dorm. Dylan and Levi were left with the strange and wonderful experience of a meal with no alcohol and no agenda. It was just dinner. Watching the 4 of them rush off to beat curfew was a bizarrely wholesome sight. A pang of envy hit Dylan. He thought back to his own college days. He'd been so arrogant. His roommates had all been his sycophants. He'd barely paid them any mind, throwing money at them like he was tossing scraps to dogs. He rarely even stayed in the dorm, convinced he was destined for a different world than theirs. He couldn't even remember one of his roommates' full names now, just that everyone called him we. He'd forgotten his last name. He'd dated a parade of campus beauties, showering them with gifts, but now their faces were a blur. His youth had been a haze of parties and conquests, a youth without memories. Levi's college experience had been different, but no less lonely. He'd gone to a better school, but it was intensely competitive. His relationships with his roommates were cordial, but distant. Everyone had their own ambitions. They called him aloof, and maybe he was. He had a clear vision for his future and was good at networking with professors and influential people. But true close friends? He didn't have any. Everyone was too smart, too calculating. Watching Leo's group, laughing and shoving each other as they piled into a car to race back to their dorm, felt like witnessing a moment of genuine youth. And for the first time, Levi felt a profound sense of envy. He suddenly realized what he had missed. He dropped Dylan off at the St. Regis, the best hotel in Bridgeport. For Dylan, a single suite was a significant downgrade from his past extravagances, but he didn't post about it on Instagram. An oligarch posting about a stay at the St. Regis would just be an admission of his downfall. Besides, powerful people kept their movements quiet. That night, alone in his suite without a beautiful stranger in his bed, he slept soundly. He'd told Leo he wanted to hang out on campus the next day, to relive the student experience. Leo, unsure what AD.C. Mogul would find interesting about Northwood State, had simply agreed. Dylan set an alarm. He remembered Leo saying he ran every morning. He hadn't woken up this early in years. The day before was for a flight, but this was by choice. He felt like he might die, but the memory of last night's meal gave him strength. In the pre-dawn darkness, he had the hotel's concierge arrange a car for the day. He didn't bother Levi. He arrived at the university as the sky was just beginning to pale. Campus gates were closed to unauthorized vehicles. As they approached, Dylan texted Leo, who hadn't replied. He worried he'd have to argue with the security guard. But when the car pulled up, he saw Leo waiting for him. In the faint morning light, the young man stood there in a white and khaki striped tracksuit, a bright, easy smile on his face as he waved. The air suddenly felt warmer. Dylan thought, thank God I'm straight. Because the sight of a handsome, energetic 20-year-old standing alone under the glowing university sign, the entire campus's backdrop, waiting just for you, it was enough to make anyone fall. Sean, maybe my camera is actually an invisibility cloak. Leo led him onto the campus, which was even more serene than the bustling student strip. It was only then that Dylan noticed the photographer, and he nearly jumped out of his skin. This guy was so unobtrusive, he could probably get a job as an assassin. Sean gave a slightly awkward nod and then resumed filming. Leo didn't try to guess Dylan's motives. If he said he wanted to experience campus life, then that's what he'd get. The authentic, unvarnished version, starting with a run. First stop was the regular morning check-in with his first NPC, Professor Reed, who was doing her exercises by the basketball courts. Today she wore a pair of lightweight glasses with red arms and a bespoke quilted jacket that looked both incredibly comfortable and ruinously expensive. She was always impeccably dressed, a woman who treated herself well. She noted Leo was a bit later than usual and had brought a friend. In her eyes, anyone under 40 was a kid. As they walked through the tree-lined paths, Dylan had been feeling smug about his spontaneous decision. The campus was beautiful in the morning light. He felt young again. But then he saw her. He saw Professor Reed, and he wanted to turn and run. How could she be here? He barely remembered any of his own professors, but he remembered her. During his arrogant phase, he'd grown bored of conventionally beautiful girlfriends and decided, on a whim, to date an Ivy League genius. It was a massive ego boost. One day, she'd invited him to her campus. He'd strutted around, his wealth his shield, until he passed a lecture hall and saw a professor inside, lecturing with such intensity that spittle flew as she excoriated her students. He didn't understand a word she was saying. It was a stream of advanced mathematical concepts, but he could tell from the terrified faces of the students that it was brutal. The experience gave him a massive intellectual inferiority complex. He'd made an excuse and fled. The professor was Evelyn Reed. The encounter had left him with a deep-seated fear of brilliant women. And now, years later, hundreds of miles from the capital, he was standing before her again, about to do warm-ups. Dylan's arms and legs moved stiffly, his hands and feet on the same side, rising and falling in perfect, uncoordinated rhythm. Professor Reed glanced at the new kid. He seemed a bit slow on the uptake, like his cerebellum wasn't fully developed. Clearly, a boy with no affinity for mathematics. She dismissed him and turned her attention back to Leo, who followed her through their usual warm-up routine. Sean filmed silently. Some commenter asked, "Doesn't the cameraman need to warm up? Cameramen have a right to exercise too." "Sean, I swear I will hit you with my tripod." His workout is hauling 40 pounds of gear all day. Sean noticed Dylan's movements were stiff. He looked nervous. In that moment, he felt a strange kinship with the rich playboy from D.C. So, even the wealthy were terrified of math professors. Leo kept up his usual patter with Professor Reed, chatting as they stretched. Today, there was no surprise quest, just a sincere compliment. "The food at your restaurant really is excellent," she said. "My neighbor Lynn texted me last night after she got home, raving about it." Dr. Lee couldn't stop talking about it, either. "We're just getting started," Leo said modestly. Still plenty of room for improvement. Standing nearby, like a malfunctioning android, Dylan was floored. Room for improvement. Last night's fish sauce had made him eat an entire bowl of rice. If it got any better, he'd be ruined for all other food. He remembered his grandfather telling stories about his childhood, how he could make one snail last for 3 bowls of rice, 1 bowl for a sip of the broth, 1 for meat, and 1 for sucking the shell clean. Dylan had always thought he was exaggerating. Last night, he'd finally understood. The sincere praise registered with the system, and Leo was rewarded with another 0. 1 centimeters. He carefully added the points. Leo 5'9", 2-foot Foster felt that with a little more effort, he would no longer be the shortest in his dorm. Onward and upward. After bidding farewell to Professor Reed, they headed for the track. Away from her oppressive aura, Dylan felt like he'd been resurrected. The campus experience was terrifyingly authentic. On the track, his usual confidence returned. He'd had more than his share of girlfriends, earning a reputation as one of D.C.'s most notorious playboys. He was handsome, outgoing, and spent a fortune on personal trainers to maintain his physique. He was active again, no longer tense for the camera. He grinned at Leo. "Race you?" Leo shook his head. "I can't. This is just my daily workout. I don't run fast." "Fine," Dylan said, his competitive spirit ignited. "They'll just go slow. First one to quit loses." He was sure of his endurance. They started running. At first, Dylan was relaxed. Leo was equally composed. Running is always hardest for the first few days. After that, it becomes enjoyable. Soon, you feel off if you miss a day. Leo maintained his steady pace. Sean ran slightly ahead to get his shots. But as they rounded the track again and again, Dylan's legs started to burn. His breathing grew ragged. He felt like a dying fish, but he pushed on. This was insane. The 2 guys with him were barely breaking a sweat. One had a perfectly even breathing rhythm, his expression unchanged. The other was sprinting ahead with a camera and turned back to give him a calm, almost shy smile. "Are you guys even human?" Dylan thought. "Don't you breathe hard? This isn't scientific." "Leo, the system is my personal trainer. I'm a tireless running machine." "Sean, I used to run around the farm back home, carrying calves." "You believe me?" After the run, Leo grinned. "Come on, I'll take you to get the best breakfast on the student strip." Dylan, legs trembling slightly, readily agreed. They walked to a small, perpetually crowded stall, famous for its savory breakfast porridge. The owner, a woman who was a campus legend in her own right, sported colorful tattoos up her arms and a vintage band t-shirt. She greeted Leo with a familiar nod. Leo ordered 3 luxury yacht combos, a name that made Dylan smirk. It sounded like something you'd order at a club in Miami. The woman worked with practiced, efficient motions, ladling the thick, steaming porridge into bowls and topping it with beef, shrimp, and a sprinkle of what looked like crispy fried shallots and herbs. The bowls arrived, smelling incredible. Dylan, full of post-workout hunger, eagerly scooped up a huge spoonful. "Whoa, careful," Leo started, but it was too late. Dylan yelped, spitting the molten hot porridge back out, thankfully onto the ground and not into his bowl. His tongue felt like it had been scorched. Leo winced sympathetically. "Sorry, man. It's like soup dumplings. Looks fine on the surface, but the inside is lava. You have to scrape it from the edges and let it cool a bit." Nursing his tongue with a bottle of water, Dylan followed Leo's instructions. The porridge was good, not life-changing like last night's meal, but deeply comforting and flavorful, with a peppery kick that warmed him from the inside out. As he ate, he noticed that every other male student in the vicinity was also eating, but their eyes were all fixed on the owner. He watched her work, her movements confident and graceful, and suddenly he understood. The food was only half the experience. The students were here for dinner and a show. The porridge suddenly tasted a lot better. "She's the street's main attraction," Leo said, reading his mind. After they finished, Leo ordered 2 more bowls to go. For the roommates, he explained. Back at the dorm, Dylan was surprised to find the building had no elevator. He entered their room. It was cramped but neat. But after a morning of running and a big breakfast, he needed to use the restroom. He scanned the walls. There was no hidden door, no bathroom. He was directed to the public one down the hall. Though it was clean, a testament to the university president's strict standards, he was still in shock. Leo lived like this and hadn't moved out? Leo just repeated the same line Dean Roberts had used on them about building character through hardship. Dylan was almost convinced. Wait, I don't need to build character. I'm already graduated. The cramped quarters, however, seemed to foster a real camaraderie. They brought each other food, Venmo'd each other without a second thought, and joked around with an easy familiarity. He looked at Alex, the son of a powerful official, perfectly happy in this tiny room, and thought, man, I really was an ass back then. Leo changed clothes, grabbed a couple of apples from a bowl on Alex's desk, and then they were off again. Next stop, the study hall. He handed Dylan a book he'd grabbed from the room. They entered the old brick building, walking up the picturesque staircase. The study hall was already filled with the fixed NPCs, Colin Edwards and Wendy Liu. Leo handed them the apples, and they, in turn, offered him 2 different yogurts, one date-flavored, one with granola. It was their routine, a simple exchange. Leo handed Dylan the book, then opened his own textbook on traditional medicine, pulling up his godfather's notes on his tablet. Dylan wanted to chat, but the atmosphere was thick with scholarly intent. He found himself, against all odds, opening the book. The cover read, "The Flavor of Memory." He thought, won't this make me look like a slacker? But everyone around him was so focused. He felt like the class dunce and ducked his head down to read. And to his astonishment, he got completely lost in it. He couldn't remember the last time he had read a physical book. In that moment, with the weight of the paper in his hands, he was transported. A camera was recording it all, a man rediscovering the timeless world of reading. Dylan had always thought he was allergic to reading, but as he inexplicably absorbed the words on the page, he felt a strange tickle in his brain, as if new neural pathways were firing. The book was a simple collection of food essays, mostly about Shanghainese cuisine and the author's travels. It made him think of an old girlfriend from Shanghai, whose delicate, sweet and savory food he'd never understood. Now, reading the book, her face came back to him in vivid detail. Why had they broken up? He couldn't remember. He felt a surge of misplaced confidence. If one book could teach him about an entire regional cuisine, what could a book on economics do? Or architecture? He felt like a USB drive, ready to download all the knowledge in the world. It was a powerful illusion, but he sat there quietly for a long time, genuinely engrossed. He wasn't performing for the camera anymore. He'd forgotten it was even there. Eventually, a creeping cold brought him back to reality. The classroom, for all its scholarly charm, had no heating. His bones felt frozen. Leo stood up and stretched. He was using his time dilation buff, allowing him to focus intensely, but he still took breaks to move around. When Dylan peeked at what he'd been working on, he saw stacks of paper covered in elegant, indecipherable script. His own brain, which had felt so expansive moments before, seemed to shrink back to its normal size. When he thought the day's academic trials were over, Leo announced the next stop, the art studio. Dylan, already feeling the full weight of his 3-day intellectual workout, was stunned. But he saw the undiminished energy in Leo's eyes and felt a pang of shame. He rallied himself and followed. When Leo pushed open the door to the studio, Dylan froze. Sitting in the middle of the room, staring directly at him with piercing eyes, was General Ingram. Dylan's heart skipped 2 beats before he realized it was a painting. The likeness was so real, so full of life, it was terrifying. General Ingram asked me to paint his portrait, Leo said casually. I got so busy I almost forgot. Dylan stared at him. Leo was the true master of the flex. If General Ingram had asked him to do something, he would have done it that same night. Forgetting was not an option. Leo gave Dylan a spare easel and some paints and told him to amuse himself. He then returned to his own work, layering on colors with intense focus. Sean filmed from an angle that captured both of them at work without revealing the details of Leo's portrait. Dylan, who had once dated an art student, started to paint. He'd never understood her abstract canvases, but he'd learned a thing or two. He began sketching a series of mischievous-looking cartoon devils. One had dark circles under its eyes, one had its hands in its pockets, and another was lying on its back chewing a blade of grass. To his surprise, he was having fun. More fun than he'd ever had waiting for his artist girlfriend, his mind elsewhere. The morning light filtered through the tall, arched windows, illuminating the two young men working in quiet concentration. It was a scene of peaceful, focused creativity. Dylan was starting to get the hang of it. Honestly, if he ever went broke, he could probably get a job at an art school for kids. He was pretty proud of his devil drawings. Leo finished another hour of focused work. The portrait of General Ingram looked even more formidable now. With Leo's permission, Dylan snapped a picture to send to Liam. He thought, surely it was time for lunch. But no. The next stop was the library. Dylan was truly exhausted. Running, studying, painting, he'd done more in one morning than he had in the last 3 days. University life was relentless. They walked across campus, past a lake dotted with small, round islands. It looks like a fantasy world when the fog rolls in, Leo said, acting as a tour guide. They passed a small cemetery on a hill, then the music building, from which animalistic shrieks emanated. Finally, they reached the library, the Vance Athenaeum, its name glittering in the sun. I know this building, Dylan said, pointing. Some tycoon donated it and named it after his daughter. Levi had told him that part. He hadn't mentioned that the daughter was Leo's girlfriend. Leo just chuckled. The library was warm and bustling with students. He followed Leo into a reading room, where Leo began a strange ritual, pulling a book from the shelves at random, flipping through a page or two, and putting it back, like he was scrolling through TikTok. That one no good? Dylan asked about a book Leo had just replaced. It was interesting, Leo said. It was a psychology book. I flipped to a page that asked what women want most in a relationship. It said the answer is always scarcity. If you're rich and well-connected, your scarcest quality is your time and patience. That's what she'll want. If you're poor, but incredibly kind and emotionally available, your scarcest quality is money. That's what she'll want. He paused. Then it said what men want is always the same. Someone young and beautiful. I thought that was a bit simplistic, so I put it back. Dylan felt a jolt of revelation. He finally understood his past relationships. He always thought he liked women who weren't materialistic because they all claimed they didn't care about his money. They just wanted him to be more ambitious and spend more time with them. He didn't know how to be ambitious, and he was too restless to just spend time, so he'd guiltily buy them more bags and gifts to compensate. It had never worked. Now he knew why. Eventually, Leo settled on a thin book on economics. Dylan, not wanting to seem like a complete fool, grabbed a book with lots of pictures, The Complete Guide to Succulents. He sat across from Leo at a sunlit table. He opened the book, stared at the pictures of fleshy little plants, and promptly fell asleep. Sean, ever the diligent documentarian, captured the moment. Leo read, occasionally jotting notes. Dylan snored softly, a thin line of drool connecting his mouth to his arm. He woke with a start when Leo stood up to return his book. He'd been dreaming of eating at Leo's restaurant. He wiped his mouth, embarrassed. It had been a long time since he'd slept that soundly. His half-day tour of campus life was over. He was exhausted. Leo, however, was still brimming with energy. Dylan told Leo he had business to attend to in the afternoon, but would be back for the late-night meal. Once he was away from the camera, Dylan felt a wave of relief. He climbed into his waiting car and called Levi. Buy the land next to the ranch, too, he said. Leo had offered to have the finished portrait delivered to D.C. This was a direct line to General Ingram. Leo had come through for him. He couldn't be cheap. On the drive, Dylan chatted with the driver. You handle this car well, he said. Much smoother than my Maybach. The driver, a professional at humoring clients, played along. Wow, a Maybach. I bet nobody dares to pass you on the highway. You'd think so, Dylan sighed dramatically, launching into a story he'd seen on TikTok. But the other day, this black government suburban blows past me. I was about to lay on the horn, but then I saw the official plates. Okay, fine. But then a third car, some cheap, ugly thing I've never even seen before, passes me. That was it. I told my driver to chase it down. But he just said, Sir, we can't get angry at that one either. The license plate is 00001. The driver laughed heartily, thinking this guy's just quoting TikToks. What Dylan didn't say was that someone had filmed the whole incident and posted it online. He met Levi for a quick, cheap lunch before they went to deal with a land purchase. Levi was impressed. A man who could casually drop millions on real estate was eating a $10 lunch. But Dylan was just saving room for dinner. Paige's video of her eating the chicken cake, which she'd posted to TikTok and Instagram with minimal, amateurish editing, had blown up. Last time, she was shrimp head girl. This time, she was chicken cake girl. There was something about the way she ate that was mesmerizing. She wore her signature dogbone choker, her expression as innocent as if her mind had never been polluted by a single complex thought. As she took huge, happy bites of a simple sponge cake, viewers found their own mouths watering. The video's likes and shares skyrocketed. The comments were flooded with people begging for a link to the cake and declaring her their new internet wife. She patiently replied to one of the comments. There's no link. The cake is from a private kitchen, and the owner makes it himself. It's so good. Ew. No why-oh. Then she painstakingly pasted a screenshot of the restaurant's Google Maps page. Dylan spent the afternoon finalizing the purchase of the land next to the horse ranch. Levi, meanwhile, was working to earn his own spot at dinner. He had successfully secured the city's cultural promotion grant for The Roommate Chronicles. It was for $30,000 a year. The department's entire social media budget was $150,000 a year. They'd already spent $100,000 on their own official accounts for equipment upgrades and boosted posts, and had managed to gain a pathetic 2,000 followers, 800 of whom were probably relatives of the staff. For Levi, this move was a triple win. He got to do his job, he did a favor for Leo, and he secured an invitation to dinner. The $30,000 was nothing to Leo and his friends, but it was official government money, a stamp of legitimacy that would protect the channel from being arbitrarily shut down and would open the door for future official collaborations. Levi had worked hard for his meal. He was looking forward to it. Leo and Sean finished their reading and started a slow walk toward the private restaurant. For a stretch, Leo carried Sean's backpack, treating it like a bit of strength training. The thing was a brick. It felt like Sean's entire editing suite was in there. Shouldn't you just get a dedicated desktop for the office here? Leo asked, shifting the weight. Nah, I'm used to this one. All my software is set up perfectly, and it's not that heavy, Sean said, ever the pragmatist. Save money where you can. Since it was just the two of them, Leo asked about Sean's parents and his sister, Sarah. My dad, just like me, can't sit still. My mom's been doing a lot better lately. Her spirits are up. Last time we video chatted, the swelling in her face was almost gone. My sister, she's in this crazy intense study mode. Looks like she's going feral, honestly. She's gotten kind of ugly. Seriously, I saw her on video the other day, and yikes. It was the kind of brutal honesty only a brother could deliver. Somewhere in Grassfield Hollow, Sarah Riley just sneezed. You're dead, Sean. You are so dead. Senior year of high school. You don't really have time to worry about your looks, Leo said, nodding. It'll pass once exams are over. He remembered his own senior year. Their class president had been a big, sturdy girl, a little chubby with some acne, who ended up getting into Berkeley. He'd run into her during winter break of their sophomore year, and she was a completely different person, tall, slim, and beautiful. It was only then he realized she'd been pretty all along. Hey, next time you send your sister a care package, I've got a sports watch for her. Penelope Hayes gave it to me as a little gift yesterday. The band is this really nice bright orange. She can have it. Awesome. She'll love that, Sean said with a grin. She asks me more questions about you in her text than she does about me. Leo felt an odd, inexplicable twinge of guilt. As they neared the restaurant, the system's mechanical voice chimed in his head. Host has actively studied economic theory. However, your knowledge is half-baked at best, resulting in a God-complex-like delusion that you can predict the market. This state is the most likely to lead to self-destruction. It is recommended that the host continue to read more and make fewer decisions. A qualitative shift can only occur after a quantitative accumulation of reading time. Is that its way of giving me a reward? Leo wondered. Is it just telling me to leave my stock account alone? That inaction is the best action? Probably. He was good at following instructions, so he continued to do what he was already doing. Nothing. When they arrived, Leo spotted Stella and her ever-present shadow, Jessica Monroe. With a casual confidence, Leo wedged himself right between them, aiming to nudge Jessica aside. It worked, but as he moved past her, he noticed a faint blush on her cheeks. He reached for Stella's hand, his fingers tracing the long, soft lines of her palm, feeling the faint calluses there. For people in love, even just holding hands could send sparks flying, a secret thrill shared in public. Weren't you with another friend? Stella asked, noticing it was just him and Sean. Where'd he go? He had to head back for something, but he said he's coming back for a late-night bite. Leo leaned in close to her ear, lowering his voice. He didn't really need a whisper, but it was the perfect excuse to get closer, to feel the warmth of her skin. Want me to take you somewhere tomorrow morning? Where? It's a secret. In reality, Leo had no idea. Sean had just said something about checking out a horse ranch in the morning. They spoke in low, intimate tones, a soft smile playing on Stella's lips. Watching them, Mr. Lou, acting as an unofficial observer, made a mental note. Miss Vance's relationship with Mr. Foster is excellent and stable. This appears to be the very picture of love, the thrill of a college romance. It was almost exciting to witness. Seeing their closeness, Jessica excused herself and went to find Hannah-chan to help with the evening's prep work. Yesterday, she and Stella had gone to meet with a social media influencer she knew from before, trying to get a batch of products featured in a live stream. It had gone well. If it took off, she stood to make at least $3,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was money earned without running around, without having to babysit a storefront. It was a smarter way to work. Of course, if it failed, she'd lose everything. The 10,000 or so she had her name would be gone. But it didn't matter. She'd started with nothing anyway. There was just one other thing bugging her. Since her mother, Julianne, had returned to Singapore, she'd started sending a cheesy, copy-pasted "good morning" motivational quote every single day, like some multi-level marketing bot. Then, somehow, her father had heard Julianne was back in the country and had been calling her nonstop for days. The first time she'd answered, he'd launched right into a tirade. "That bitch your mother. She didn't raise you for a single day. I hear she's loaded now. You need to get money from her, at least get her to pay back all the years of child support she owes me." Jessica hadn't listened to the rest. She just hung up. Her connection with her parents was thin. The mother who'd given birth to her had never been around, so they weren't close. The father who had raised her was always there, but they weren't close either. Still, she felt better now than she had in a long time. She had spent her whole life pretending, and it was exhausting. Here, people knew who she was, what she was like, and it was grounding. It felt real, and she wasn't afraid anymore. She did her best to ignore the couple on the terrace and focused on reviewing the guest list with Hannah. They were fully booked again. They went over the table arrangements, dietary restrictions, and the set menu. Soon, it would be time for the staff's pre-service meal. Thank God they weren't open for lunch, or they'd be run ragged. Sean would blush whenever he saw Hannah. He'd help her with tasks, but could barely string a sentence together. The rest of the roommates were getting anxious for him, but what could they do? You could help a friend with almost anything, but when it came to romance, you were on your own. After their meal, Sean went up to the office to edit. Hannah brought him a plate of fruit and saw him completely absorbed in his work, so she left without disturbing him. She knew her getting this job had something to do with Sean. The owner wouldn't have hired her so decisively otherwise. The pay and benefits were great, but the food alone was unbeatable. She didn't have any particular feelings for Sean, though. As a self-described little chubby girl, she had a bit of a complex when it came to romance and never assumed anyone would be interested. It had never crossed her mind. She just thought he was a nice guy. But now, seeing him so focused, she had to admit there were moments when he was actually quite handsome. She slipped away quietly, leaving him to his work. Sean was in the zone, his head down. He felt good about today's footage. Dylan Sloan was a handsome guy, no doubt. Next to him, Leo seemed quieter, more reserved. Dylan had that mischievous look in his eyes, a charming, roguish vibe. But when they were together on camera, Leo held his own completely. He wasn't overshadowed in the slightest. In fact, they were evenly matched. Sometimes, Leo even came across as more composed, more sophisticated. The camera is a strange thing, Sean thought. Maybe he was just used to filming Leo, but when he looked at him through the lens, he sometimes saw a completely different person. He looked like the sole heir to some mysterious, old money dynasty, the kind of guy who owned a private island in the Pacific and could fly off for a vacation at a moment's notice. In reality, Leo's family was perfectly normal, though definitely better off than his own. Leo was a city kid, after all. Maybe his camera just favored Leo. No matter how he shot him, the footage always looked good. He'd worried that Dylan, with his big city swagger, would steal the show, but it hadn't happened at all. It was perfect. This was Sean's first time editing a two-person video, and he felt the pressure. But Dylan was so lively he was great on camera. Sean added subtitles to their morning workout, captioning the part where he met the math professor with encountering a math boss, marching out of sync. Then came the running segment, from grand proclamations to a wheezing surrender, showing Dylan collapsing onto the steps, panting. The study session in the classroom was warm and inspiring. The library scene, with Dylan drooling in his sleep, was hilarious. The whole interaction was fantastic, and the final edit had a real narrative flow. At least Sean thought so. He finished a cut and sent it to Leo. "Forward this to Dylan. If he's cool with it, I'll post it." Dylan Sloan was in the middle of some paperwork when the video link came through. He snuck a look. Okay, it was pretty funny, especially the shot of him sleeping like a pig at the end. The whole video was lighthearted, and even the funny parts didn't make him look bad. He actually looked pretty good. Not like he was using a filter, just watchable. He replied, "Looks great. Please thank Sean for me." Leo, okay. Posting now. Dylan Sloan had a TikTok account, but he kept it private. You had to follow him, and he had to approve you before you could see his content. Even so, he had over 300,000 followers. He used to be pretty wild on there, regularly providing fodder for gossip. For a while, he was a minor internet celebrity. It was only in the last 6 months that he'd locked his account down. After his grandfather passed away, he'd looked back at his old videos and cringed. It was all just shameless flexing, a chronicle of a decadent, aimless life. Every video basically screamed, Dylan Sloan, dumb, rich, and an easy mark. Come and get it. Instead of deleting them one by one, he just made the account private. Now, only a small circle could see what he posted, and he'd been keeping a low profile, rarely posting at all. The only time he appeared online was when someone else accidentally filmed him. But in the age of information overload, no one paid that much attention. He wasn't a celebrity. Celebrities relied on their looks for a living. He didn't. He had a generic rich kid face, the kind you saw on all the other second and third generation heirs who weren't trying to make it in Hollywood. He wasn't famous enough to be recognized everywhere. But in certain circles, he was a known quantity. For the students at those finishing schools for aspiring socialites, Dylan Sloan was a prime target. They were taught to recognize his face. The mischievous eyes, the slightly crooked smile, the way he wore designer clothes like they were rags, his preference for brands without logos. That was Dylan Sloan, generous, a player, never serious. Anyone who could land him would be a star graduate. But lately, he'd been invisible. He was rarely seen on social media or at his old haunts, the familiar bars and clubs. Rumors had started to fly that his family had gone bankrupt, that his patrons were gone. Then, today, someone was scrolling through TikTok and suddenly saw him. Wait, isn't that Dylan Sloan? Mr. Sloan? The guy who buys purses, apartments, and private rooms for his flavor of the week? He's back in school. How old is he? Is this for a reality show? The bastard's not dead, he's alive. A third-generation heir who had a long-standing feud with Dylan saw the video. He watched him living a quiet life on a university campus, jogging, studying, drooling in the library. Ugh, gross. He'd always despised that idiot Dylan, who strutted around chasing girls and acting like a big shot just because his grandfather was so-and-so. Even after the old man died, the jerk was still a jerk. He hadn't thought about him in ages. And now, here he was on his feed. For the first time ever, he found himself thinking that Dylan didn't seem as annoying as he used to. It was like he had turned over a new leaf, become a new person. It was almost cute. He couldn't believe the day had come when he didn't want to punch Dylan Sloan on sight. Their rivalry had started when they'd both been interested in the same girl. Dylan got to her first, then dumped her just as quickly. At the time, he thought he'd found true love and had been furious. To top it off, Dylan had the gall to act all smug, claiming he'd done him a favor. A bunch of other people who knew Dylan saw the video and were just as surprised. This guy, he seems different. He's actually kind of likable now. Before, any news about him was always about him buying out the bar for everyone, or being seen with a different girl every week, or with some other trashy scandal. He just had one of those faces you wanted to punch. But now, seeing him in the clean, bright daylight of a college campus, surrounded by normal people, he seemed different. That old professor was adorable, and in front of him, Dylan was as meek as a lamb. Then he went running with his friend, bragging beforehand about how he was going to crush him, only to end up panting like a husky with his tongue hanging out, barely able to move. People who had followed Sean's account, the Roommate Chronicles, had never thought much about his fitness. When he ran alone, there was no reference point. You didn't know if he was really running or if it was just clever editing. Most people assumed it was edited, but who cared? As long as it looked real, it was fine. No one was doing forensic analysis on a TikTok video. But today, seeing him run with a friend, it was obvious. Sean was the real deal. His stamina was incredible. Dylan, who had started out so cocky, was quickly left in the dust while Sean just kept going, lap after lap. Because the camera was focused on Dylan, it would catch Sean as he lapped him, waving. The contrast was hilarious. There was also a scene where Dylan went to use the bathroom and was shocked that the dorm room didn't have a private one. The comments section exploded with solidarity. Half the viewers wailed that their dorms didn't have them either. The other half gloated that theirs had private bathrooms, air conditioning, and a water heater, though they had to pay for their own electricity. Regular followers already knew Sean's dorm room was spotless. The very first video had been of him cleaning and organizing it. Then they watched Dylan and Sean studying together in a classroom. The sight of them hitting the books together was prime shipping material. The girls were taking screenshots of them from behind, declaring it the perfect real-life embodiment of their favorite dual male lead novels. Clean, not greasy, both driven and clearly well off. One with mischievous, flirty eyes, the other introverted, quiet, and handsome. It was a perfectly balanced meal. The final scene of them in the library was even better. The one with the mischievous eyes had fallen asleep, while his roommate continued to study. One reading, one sleeping, that was college life. It was a picture of serene, beautiful days. After watching the video, you couldn't help but smile. Dylan himself didn't notice at first, but when he finished watching, he was smiling too. Even the people who held grudges against him found themselves thinking he was much more tolerable now. They almost felt a little guilty, wondering if they had kicked him when he was down. Probably not. Some of the more discerning viewers saw it for what it was, rebranding, and a successful one at that. They wondered where he had found this influencer to partner with. The collaboration had completely changed his vibe, his image, his whole persona. Was the Sloan family making a comeback? TikTok's algorithm must have kicked in. The people who followed Dylan were probably the first to see it. Since his own account was private, the video was pushed to his tens of thousands of followers, an active and engaged audience highly sensitive to any news about him. Even Liam Ingram saw the video. Not because he was scrolling TikTok, but because someone had forwarded it to a group chat. He saw that Dylan had gone to see Leo and was hanging out with him at the university. It looked pretty good. He went on TikTok and gave it a like. Dylan seemed like an okay guy. He knew how to get things done. A few of Dylan's ex-girlfriends, some of whom still kept tabs on him, had heard rumors that his family was in trouble after he'd made his account private. Dylan had always been generous with his breakups. They were mostly amicable, rarely messy. Even after they stopped dating, they usually remained on decent terms. Seeing him now, some of them felt a little flutter of attraction again, lamenting that they hadn't been his last girlfriend. Wait, has Dylan given up on girls and started dating guys now? This other guy is really handsome. They knew Dylan was from a rich and powerful family, or at least he used to be. But the guy he was with looked like he came from an even more impressive background. He had to be the scion of some low-key, powerful family, even more formidable than Dylan's, and younger too. In the video, Dylan was clearly more deferential to him. You could feel who was in charge. This was the first time the Roommate Chronicles had featured a guest, and the fans were ecstatic. The comment section blew up as people started to realize the guest was a known personality. Those who had followed both Dylan and Sean were losing their minds. Their two faves had finally collaborated. The video went viral. Dylan's private TikTok account gained over 10,000 new follower requests in a single day. Sean's account saw a massive influx of new followers, absorbing a large chunk of Dylan's old audience. The comments were flooded with pleas. Please, keep filming, we want more. We're starving. Dylan's years-long bad reputation was suddenly being rehabilitated by a simple video of campus life. It was like a man who had spent his life drinking, gambling, and womanizing suddenly did one good deed, and everyone instantly declared him a changed man. A prodigal son returned, a saint. That afternoon, Dylan's phone started blowing up. People who had once called him a dog, who had sworn they'd never speak to him again, whose last message had been an insult, were now texting him things like, "Dylan, you're hanging out without me." Dylan stared at his phone. Maybe you should reread our last conversation before you start acting cute. One of his exes, a brilliant academic he had driven crazy, suddenly asked if he was short on cash and Venmo'd him $5,000. He looked at the notification, a strange feeling of guilt washing over him. He had spent a lot of money on a lot of girlfriends, but with this one, she'd left before he'd really had the chance. And now she was sending him money? What? He was the one receiving money? It felt odd. Was this what being a trophy husband felt like? A strange new experience. What the hell was going on? Even his uncle, who was usually furious with him, called to say he was pleased with his recent progress and felt gratified. It was all so bizarre. A director he'd met while trying to promote some influencer even asked if he wanted to be on a lifestyle reality show. Dylan's phone didn't stop ringing all afternoon. It was common knowledge that he steered clear of A-list celebrities, but had a soft spot for influencers, and his taste was remarkably consistent. Cute, big-eyed girls with pouty lips. Of course, there had been a few exceptions, but those were brief. Many of his partners weren't actually influencers. It was just that the ones who were tended to be louder and more inclined to show off, which created a certain public perception. The non-influencers were usually much more private. Levi, who had been with Dylan when he bought the land, also saw the forwarded video. He hadn't expected it to blow up like this. He was with Dylan that afternoon, watching the endless stream of calls and messages. An idea began to form in Levi's mind. Could filming a TikTok with Leo Foster really be this beneficial? He wanted in. He was, after all, the client who had paid for the promotional funding. Couldn't the client make a request of the contractor? Dylan was bewildered but also felt a warm glow inside. He had originally just wanted to show Liam Ingram that he had followed through, that he was genuinely grateful to Leo. The video was primarily for Liam and for Connor Brighton, the guy who had introduced him to Leo in the first place. Connor saw the video too and thought, Dylan's finally wised up. He's latched onto someone powerful. He almost envied him. Being outside the system gave you flexibility. You could move when you needed to. The flood of positive messages only strengthened Dylan's resolve. He had to handle this matter for Leo perfectly, solidify this connection, and ensure Leo had no lingering concerns. He grabbed Levi. Come on, let's go look at cars. It's a bit of a drive from the university to the horse ranch. You're going to need a car. Leo himself didn't think much of it. He was in videos every day. Sean posted them all the time. He'd been nervous at first, but now he was used to it. He spent the afternoon working in the kitchen, and Sean, after posting the day's video, came down to film. Alex returned in the afternoon. Dean Roberts wants to come for dinner tonight with some friends, he told Leo in the kitchen. We need to set it up. He watched Leo work for a moment and noticed something interesting. Leo wasn't actually cooking himself. He was guiding Chef Wu. And for everything Chef Wu did, Leo offered praise. The chef was practically glowing, his face flushed red. He moved with a new swagger, twirling and flipping his walk like a Wild West gunslinger. The more Leo praised him, the more animated he became. Alex had worried that Leo, being so quiet, wouldn't know how to manage people. But with his eloquence, his way with words, his silver tongue, Chef Wu, the texture on that is perfect. Was there a special technique to the way you flipped it just now? Does that make it easier on your wrist? You know so much. Watching Chef Wu, who looked like a donkey that had just been fed a magical elixir, brandishing his spatula with the flair of a conquering hero, a shiver went down Alex's spine. Leo isn't training a chef, he thought. He's forging a loyal disciple who would die for him. Leo didn't think he was laying it on too thick. He genuinely didn't know how to cook most of these things. He was still learning. Besides, this was how his mom always praised his dad. His father would be in the kitchen, clanging and chopping away, and wouldn't let his mom set foot inside. She'd just peek in and say, "Whose husband is this handsome? Oh, right, he's mine. Honey, you're the best cook in the world." Leo had probably picked it up by osmosis. The veins on Chef Wu's neck were bulging with effort. The boss is praising me like this. I must work even harder. Leo continued to work on his chili sauce. He wasn't secretive about it at all. He made it right out in the open. Chef Wu had tried to replicate it, following the exact same steps, but the result was never the same. Maybe it was a matter of touch, or some tiny detail he was missing. His own version was just salty and one-dimensionally spicy, lacking the rich, complex aroma of Leo's. So, he kept watching and learning. Today's soup base was beef bone. Chef Wu had seen some fresh ones at the market and brought them back. Beef bones could be a bit gamey and greasy if not prepared correctly, but some people love the marrow inside. The marrow bones were cut open, and Chef Wu said you could wrap them in foil and roast them. The rest of the bones went into a large pot to simmer, slowly releasing their flavor. The art of the kitchen was like that bone broth, a slow, patient craft. Leo was gradually getting used to the rhythm of the back of the house. He found a kind of freedom in the work, a way to decompress. It freed his mind. He'd noticed that his study sessions had become more efficient these past few days. Before, when he was just studying nonstop, he hadn't realized it, but his efficiency had been slowly declining. A kind of mental inertia had set in, a resistance. But now, since he had started cooking, even though it took up time, it was a break for his brain, a chance to empty it. He felt better. No wonder people said you needed a hobby. Doing something you loved relaxed you, changed you, and helped you go further. In the large clay pot, the bone broth bubbled away. In the oven, the foil-wrapped marrow sizzled, fat dripping. The sun hung low in the sky, and the wild grasses by the lake swayed in the breeze. At the luxury car dealership, Dylan Sloan knew that Leo had access to a Rivian R1S on campus. What he didn't know was that Leo didn't even have a driver's license. He'd only heard from Levi that the restaurant's former owner had a big G-Wagon that he used to park out front every day. It seemed to him that Leo was a low-key person, maybe a little too low-key. The guy had casually donated over $1 million in D.C. And then, with his godfather, had given a multi-million-dollar stone Buddha to the National Museum. Money clearly wasn't an issue for him. So, when giving a gift to someone who wasn't short on cash, it had to be something presentable. A run-of-the-mill car wouldn't cut it. Dylan would have been embarrassed to offer it. Social interactions are often based on perceptions of status. Influencers build a persona, often faking wealth to create trust. I wear jewelry worth millions. Why would I lie to you about a few bucks? This $89 face mask is genuinely amazing. Even as a billionaire, I use it. You can't go wrong buying it. People think he's so rich, he wouldn't bother scamming me over something so small. They're told he's just selling stuff for fun, sharing his life, spoiling his fans. In reality, that $89 mask, selling 100,000 units in one live stream with a cost of $9 including shipping, nets him a cool $8 million. Do that a few times, and he really is a billionaire. People subconsciously label the rich as not needing money. The truth is often different. Leo, I'm very much in need. Gifts for the wealthy had to be even more valuable for fear of being seen as cheap. Dylan had initially wanted to get a G-Wagon. It seemed fitting for a horse ranch. But they didn't have any in stock, and nothing else caught his eye. Levi had thought they were just getting a simple daily driver, but Dylan had deemed everything at the first dealership unworthy. The flood of messages Dylan had received that afternoon, more than in the past 6 months combined, had changed his perspective. For half a year, he'd been experiencing the cold reality of fallen influence. But this afternoon felt like the old days, when he was the one buying round for the whole bar. The feeling of regaining something you've lost is uniquely potent, and this time, it felt different. He'd always been a generous person by nature. Levi understood what Dylan was looking for and took him to a local dealership specializing in high-end luxury vehicles, the kind of place that usually required an appointment. But Levi had enough clout in Bridgeport to walk right in. He told the salesman to show them anything they had on the lot that could be driven away today. Salesmen are experts at sizing up customers. Levi was a local heavyweight, so his guest was obviously not short on funds. The salesman enthusiastically recommended a white Bentley Bentayga, a large SUV. He explained that it had been reserved for another customer, but if Mr. Sloan wanted it, they could give it to him first. Dylan took a look. It was perfect. It fulfilled his desire for an SUV. A sedan wouldn't do for driving across the fields of a ranch, and it had a commanding presence. He made his decision on the spot. I'll take it. He paid for it outright. The final price came to $610,000, fully loaded with all the top-tier options. The staff flew into action, bringing tea and pastries. A huge client, a miracle sale. The sales pressure at luxury dealerships was immense. With the economy slowing down, there weren't as many big spenders. In the past, they could act as arrogant as clerks in a high-fashion boutique, picking and choosing their customers. Not anymore. Anyone who could buy was a god. Anyone who couldn't yet was a potential god to be nurtured. To be so decisive, to buy a car on the first visit. This was a VIP of the highest order. The salesman walked with a spring in his step, a grin plastered on his face as he rushed to handle the insurance and paperwork. The entire dealership was effectively closed to cater to this one client. When they heard the car was a gift, they assumed it was for a girlfriend. A man? That was fine too. They didn't discriminate. Noticing their client was getting impatient and wasn't touching the food, they expedited everything, issued a temporary tag, and got the car ready to go. The remaining paperwork would be handled by them and delivered later. Levi volunteered to drive, having his own driver take his car back. The hotel's car service, which had been assigned to Dylan, followed behind. The driver of that car was now fully convinced. This young master really did have a Rolls-Royce. One afternoon, he buys land in the east and a car in the west, spending money like water. The details of the land deal were unknown to him, but buying a Bentley on a whim? Insane. He could dine out on this story for a year. Driving the white Bentley, Levi had to admit it was nice. The comfort level of a luxury car was on another level. Even in traffic, it didn't feel as frustrating, and no one dared to tailgate or cut him off. He'd never driven one before. The seats were incredibly comfortable, better than sedans, without the usual SUV stiffness. The interior was a study in understated luxury, but the exterior was anything but. The massive front grille looked like a wide, grinning mouth. No one would even think of cutting this car off. Even the electric cars on the road seemed more polite. If cars could transform into Autobots, the Bentley would be the rich young master of the group. The Bimmers, Benz S, and Audis would be the upper middle class. Below them, the everyday workhorses. And the electric cars would be the cyberpunks, modified with advanced AI brains. Levi was getting a real taste of the D.C. elite's casual extravagance. It was different from the local money he was used to. Even a fallen scion like Dylan had more spare change than most people's entire fortunes. Dylan, it's not that much, really. I'm just used to spending. This was a big expense, but you know what they say, you have to give to get. This time, he had made a significant investment. Better to give it to Leo Foster than let his inheritance be picked apart by vultures. He had a feeling Leo was a lucky charm, a source of positive energy. Every time he was around him, something good happened. Still, as he looked at the Venmo notification on his phone, he felt a complex mix of emotions. He opened it several times, but couldn't bring himself to accept it. So this was what it felt like to have someone send you money. Meanwhile, Carter Hayes had set up a new base of operations in a different building. The first thing he did was create a massive Lakeview office for himself on the top floor. It was over 1,000 square feet, with floor-to-ceiling windows, enough space for a tea area, a desk, a lounge, and a meeting space, a private sanctuary. The only downside was that his spectacular new view looked directly down on his old private restaurant. And that restaurant was inexplicably getting more and more popular. At first, he'd assumed it was just from their TikTok marketing. But he'd sent someone to investigate, and the report came back. The food was genuinely incredible. But they didn't hire a new chef, did they? He knew perfectly well what the old chef's cooking tasted like. And the cooks who had stayed behind weren't the main chefs, just kitchen hands. Then he saw on TikTok that the new owner, this phone guy, was actually cooking himself. Was it just for show? His source said no, it was real, and it was unbelievably good. Carter still didn't believe it. He felt like he had chosen the right market, planted the seeds, and then, just as the fruit was about to ripen, someone had stolen the whole harvest. Now, he watched as waves of customers streamed in and out of the restaurant in the evening. The cheap electric car parked out front did nothing to deter them. Evening was the restaurant's busiest time. The electrician and handyman who had stayed on now doubled as waiters. But despite the hustle, there was a sense of organized calm, not chaos. Leo owed a great deal of this to Alex, his master manager. Putting someone with ambitions of becoming a state governor in charge of a small restaurant was overkill. But Alex's experience managing hundreds of students in the student government and organizing massive campus events made this feel like child's play. He'd also brought in the incredibly competent Hannah Chun, and with Jessica Monroe helping out, they had managed to slowly correct the mess left by the previous owner. Before, the restaurant had felt a bit like a frat house. The staff would goof off and have fun among themselves, regardless of whether there were customers. Now, with a smaller but more disciplined crew, things were different. They worked harder, but there was less complaining. At least now, every employee's effort was noticed by the owner, and hard work was met with genuine praise and tangible rewards. The owner had made it clear that performance was linked to pay with regular evaluations, just like taking attendance at school. The remaining staff were mostly easygoing and had developed a good rapport. The whole atmosphere had changed. Of course, the main reason for their success was that the food was just that good, especially the late-night menu. Their only real worry was gaining weight. Mr. Lou, Stella's assistant, had taken on the role of accountant. Looking at the books for the past few days, he was struck by how profitable the restaurant business could be. It was hard work, but the daily revenue was impressive, and the cash flow looked fantastic. The restaurant had been consistently losing money before, but it looked like it would turn a profit in its very first month under new management. Mr. Lou stayed out of the way of the dinner rush. He wasn't suited for it. Instead, he was busy composing his weekly report for his boss, Richard Vance. Doing the work was important, but reporting on it well was just as crucial. That afternoon, they had been inundated with people wanting to try the chicken cake. They sold out completely. They had already made extra, but they couldn't figure out the sudden demand. Was it a delivery app war? Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats, and a dozen local couriers were all showing up, one after another, to buy chicken cake. Leo had to rush to make another batch, grateful that the previous owner had installed such a massive oven. The man had really thought of everything. Still, it was exhausting, and their pricing for the cake was already steep. It was originally just something for them to eat, a complimentary treat for guests, so they had priced it somewhat arbitrarily. One slice of chicken cake was priced like a dessert at a high-end cafe. At Starbucks or a local coffee shop, a piece of cake could easily be $5 or $6. So, they had set the price of their rustic little chicken cake at a bold $5. And even at that price, they sold out and couldn't keep up. It was likely due to Paige's video. Her review was simple, direct, and had spread quickly. She had even meticulously included the restaurant's address. Soon, the phone was ringing off the hook with people asking about the cake. The staff would try to manage expectations. It's quite expensive, you know. It's not a must-have, and we don't have any other pastries. But the more they tried to dissuade people, the more determined the customers became. A kind of reverse psychology took hold. It's only $5. Who do you think you're looking down on? People were calling couriers from across the city. $5 was a lot for what it was, but if it was really that good, it was worth a try. They just think of it as a fancy dessert. When many of them received their orders, they felt ripped off. It was in all its $5 glory, just a plain, old-fashioned sponge cake. It smelled nice, and it came in a fancy little cardboard box like a Western pastry, but that didn't change its humble appearance. You could buy a whole cake for not much more than that at a bakery, and they were charging $5 for a single slice. It was outrageous. But then they remembered that they had insisted on buying it, that the staff had politely tried to warn them, that there was a limit of 2 per person. At least the damage wasn't too severe. Since they had already bought it, they might as well eat it. I'll eat it, and then I'll go write a scathing review, they thought. And that girl in the video, who made it look so good, she's probably just pretty. It has nothing to do with the food. She's getting a bad review too. The cake was so soft that it often got a little squished during delivery, which didn't help its appearance. Of course, there were also those for whom money was no object, who were simply chasing the taste of their childhood. They came with high expectations. The price didn't matter as long as it tasted like it used to. Life is a stream of countless trivialities, annoyances, and moments of joy and peace. Some people can laugh things off, while others get bogged down, arguing with themselves and with others, unable to move on. The soft sponge cake, with its light sweetness and moist crumb, paired with a bitter coffee, a warm glass of water, a Trini dirty chai, or a cold bottle of mineral water. Or with nothing at all, just slowly savored. A big bite, and it's gone in two. A small bite, 3 or 4. Or nibbled away in tiny pieces. But no matter how small the bites, it was gone too soon. It was just a slice of cake, the same size as the ones they remembered. And yet, in that moment, there was a feeling of simple, pure pleasure. A gentle wave of happiness. Joy. It was like the feeling of putting on a new dress as a child and twirling, watching the skirt fly out. Like lacing up a new pair of sneakers and taking off at a full sprint. A smile spread across their faces. It was the simple delight of a sweet treat, the satisfaction of a full stomach, the feeling that life had a sweet side. After they finished, they even savored the aftertaste for a moment. And then they thought, holy crap, $5 isn't expensive at all. For something this good, how could it be? The cakes at Starbucks are always cloyingly sweet. No wonder that girl in the video had such a beautiful expression. They could have made the same face themselves. An elderly woman took a bite of the cake and then broke off half for her 73-year-old husband. They ate in silence, together, reminiscing about a long-lost youth. For a moment, their wrinkled, age-spotted hands seemed young again. Leo and the others never would have guessed that the most famous item from their private restaurant would be the chicken cake. Perhaps it was because the other dishes couldn't be delivered and the restaurant's capacity was limited. But the cake could be ordered for takeout, and the demand was huge. And, somehow, all the reviews were positive. It was incredible. The restaurant's expensive chicken cake became a local sensation. Even Victoria Vance, having dinner with her friends that evening, heard about it. The topic of conversation among the group of older women was surprisingly risque. They were gossiping about a mysterious private restaurant that made a chicken cake so good, they said, that eating it was more satisfying than hiring a male model from an exclusive club. The women cackled with laughter. Victoria demurred. Male models? I wouldn't dare. My Richard is a very jealous man. Let's just talk about the cake. The winter days were getting colder. But the winter sunset sometimes offered a unique spectacle. The sun would hang in a cloudless sky, a clean, sharp circle, like a perfectly peeled, red, salted egg yolk suspended at the edge of the world. The colors were vivid, but offered no warmth. Downstairs, the restaurant was bustling. Leo, stealing a moment of peace, went up to the office terrace, pulling Stella along with him. The sunset might not be warm, but the air was still, and the wind wasn't biting. It was perfect. The winter sun was gentle enough to look at directly. Below, a vast patch of wild grass grew untamed by the lake. They watched as the sun sank below the horizon, a perfect circle slowly becoming a semicircle, until finally, with a silent plunge, it was gone. In ancient times, before science, Leo wondered if early humans felt a sense of panic watching the sun disappear each day. We don't, because we know that for people on the other side of the world, the sun is just beginning to rise. The sky was still stained with a deep, crimson glow. My sunset is your sunrise. They sat together on the terrace and watched the day end, a moment of profound relaxation. A beautiful waste of time. Sometimes, life required you to learn how to waste time. Perhaps those wasted moments were the most important ones. They sat quietly, Leo's hand finding hers. As it grew colder, he pulled her from her chair onto his lap, and they watched the last of the light fade together. They were in the throes of new love, a state of constant skin hunger. Just seeing each other was enough to trigger the desire for touch. Sometimes, they would just sit close, not doing anything, and a sense of deep contentment would wash over them. This was why dating could be so detrimental to a student's studies. While others were cramming their minds with math formulas, literary quotes, English vocabulary, and chemical elements, you were thinking about holding hands, touching hands, wrapping an arm around a waist, kissing, hugging. It was probably better to wait. Starting too early meant a constant battle between desire and reason. And unless you were a saint, reason rarely won. Leo was much more disciplined now. He could slip into a study mindset quickly. And yet, the moment he saw Stella, he still felt all the blood rush south of the border. Was that what the expression meant? They stayed on the terrace until the sky was dark and filled with the first stars. Downstairs, the restaurant grew even busier as the dinner rush hit its peak. Stella didn't try to play waitress. She simply didn't have the experience, and her naturally aloof expression, a resting do not approach face, would probably intimidate the customers into silence. It wasn't that she was ill-tempered, just that she looked genuinely formidable, like someone you didn't want to cross. There was no point in trying to force a weakness into a strength. Leo, by contrast, was much more approachable, his smile easy and frequent. Dean Roberts was hosting a few friends for dinner that evening, his old Army buddies. The dean was a veteran who had transitioned into university administration after his service. His friends came from all walks of life. Some had done very well for themselves, others were just getting by. But the bond of soldiers is a special one, forged in a way that's hard to replicate elsewhere. It ran deeper than even a college friendship, because these were men who had entrusted their lives to one another. Though they had left the service, that bond remained. Now, some of them were paunchy and middle-aged, but when they spoke of defending the country, their eyes still lit up. If the call came, they'd be ready to rejoin in a heartbeat. They just worried they wouldn't be able to button their old uniforms. Dean Roberts had invited 3 of his comrades. Frank was a long-haul trucker who had seen every corner of the country. Henry worked at the city government, a man of some authority. Gary had gone into business. He'd started by taking over his family's tile shop and had grown it from a single storefront to an entire floor of a building. He was a risk-taker, a man who thought big. He'd made a fortune during the real estate boom, but when he saw the market starting to cool, he had the foresight to scale back, keeping only his flagship store. At the time, everyone had called him a fool. He was a steady hand. While in the tile business, he had always been looking for the next thing, experimenting in different industries. People thought he was just restless, burning through his money. Even his wife hadn't understood. They'd divorced. But he had successfully pivoted from tile grout to medical aesthetics. Now, he owned a chain of med-spas and was a distributor for several product lines. In terms of money, Gary was the most successful of the 4. Dean Roberts and Henry, the city official, were both salaried employees. In terms of pure income, they had, for a long time, earned less than Frank the trucker. But they had stability and good benefits, and Henry had a fair amount of influence. By modern standards, Frank was the least successful with the lowest social standing. But he was in incredible shape. In the Army, he had been a model soldier, a top performer, always in the top 3 during training drills. His arms were like tree trunks. He could probably take out 10 guys in a fight. That strength had served him well as a trucker. In the early days, you had to be tough to drive the long-haul routes. Back then, he had been the highest earner, making what the other 2 made in a year on a single trip. He was generous too, always there to help if someone was in trouble, and he'd bring back little gifts from his travels, honeycombs, handmade cutting boards. The tides of time had shifted. The former top soldier was now struggling the most. The pandemic had shut down long-haul trucking for years. Now he drove for a ride-sharing service to help pay for his son's mortgage. He had earned a lot, but he'd spent a lot too, with little savings. Being on the road all the time meant he hadn't been around much for his son, who was now just an ordinary guy. Despite the changes in their fortunes, their dynamic remained largely the same. They tried to keep their friendship pure. Tonight, Dean Roberts was treating. The place he had chosen was elegant. It's on campus, so it probably isn't too expensive, Frank thought. He often treated his friends to meals, driving them to hole-in-the-wall spots he'd discovered in the city's forgotten corners, places with cheap, delicious food. No one ever put on airs. They had all come from the same trenches. But Henry and Gary, the more worldly of the 2, could tell from his service and the fact that there were no menus that this place wasn't going to be cheap. These private kitchens, no matter how small, could run up an astronomical bill. With a set menu, you were at the chef's mercy. What if they decided to serve you some exotic dish of ants buried in African elephant dung and charge you $200 for it, claiming the shipping alone was astronomical? But since the dean was paying, they didn't argue. They could always make it up to him later. Long-lasting friendships required not just their own generosity, but also the understanding of their spouses. Their circle of friends used to be larger, but marriage had changed some of them, cutting them off from their old lives. Frank's wife was a wonderful woman who knew how much these friends meant to him. When he brought back a crate of delicious sea duck eggs from a trip, she would divvy them up and send a share to each of the friends. The gifts were never expensive, but they were constant. Gary had divorced and remarried. When Frank's family was renovating their house, Gary had supplied all the tile, free of charge, claiming it was for a portfolio project. Now that he was in the Medi-Spa business, any of their kids who needed braces or other treatments were taken care of. Henry, with his government position, was the busiest, but he provided them with valuable information. Not classified, of course, but knowing something official a little sooner than the general public could be a huge advantage. And Dean Roberts was the go-to for anything related to their kids' education. Alex had arranged a corner booth for them, a cozy, quiet spot with good acoustics, perfect for conversation. Though they all lived in the same city, getting together was a rare treat. When they did, it was as if no time had passed at all. They managed to meet 3 or 4 times a year, which was a lot. Their voices boomed as they talked, old habits dying hard. The food arrived course by course. Nothing ostentatious like lobster or abalone. People who were used to business dinners knew that those dishes were more about the price tag than the taste. The portions here were modest, the style homey and comforting. They were even served a simple vegetable and rice soup, which brought back memories of tougher times, especially for Henry. Out in the world, he was Director Hayes, but here with his friends, he could relax and just be Henry. A gathering of middle-aged men might not need women, but it absolutely required alcohol. The restaurant had a good selection, but Dean Roberts hadn't ordered anything expensive. Henry had brought a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. He had to drink so much bourbon at official functions that he was sick of it, but drinking with his brothers was different. He explained that it had been a gift to his father-in-law, which his wife had promptly liberated from her parents' house. The bourbon was smooth and complex, sending a shiver down their spines as it went down. They ate, drank, and reminisced, sharing the sweet and bitter moments of lives more than half lived. They had been soldiers, and now they were a worker, a businessman, and a public servant. It was a rare thing to have come so far and still be together. The dinner was a resounding success. The bourbon was exceptional, and the food was, to their surprise, phenomenal. Henry had dined at the highest levels. A government official's salary might not be top tier, but the perks were. Yet he found this meal to be better than any of them. Was it just because he was with his brothers? Gary, the Medi-Spa tycoon, had also eaten at the best restaurants money could buy. But the fish tonight, he declared, was the most delicious he had ever tasted, bar none, and the chili sauce was explosive. Frank, the trucker, had eaten his way across the country. He'd had amazing chili sauces, especially in the South, but the one tonight brought back the memory of his first taste of a truly great one, a flavor so good he could have eaten it with a spoon. The final soup, a beef bone and ginseng broth, was rich and deeply flavorful, perfect for his road-weary body. They ate and laughed and cried, their bond as real as ever. As the host professor, Leo felt he should make an appearance. He came in to say hello. Dean Roberts proudly introduced him to his friends. Frank's eyes lit up. "I know you," he boomed, slapping his thigh. "I've seen you on TikTok. You're that Roommate Chronicles guy. Kid, you're even better looking in person. I thought it was all special effects." Leo greeted each of them politely, raising a cup of tea and a toast before excusing himself. They were the last table, a group of old friends lost in conversation. As they were finally leaving, they ran into a scene at the entrance. Levi was there, along with a few others. "Director Hayes, good to see you, sir," Levi said, stepping forward to greet Henry. Henry's face lit up with a warm smile. "Levi, good to see you too." He was surprisingly familiar with the young man, who came from a powerful family and was making a name for himself. He was the kind of young man whose starting line was the finish line for most people. The other veterans watched, a little bemused. In the booth, Henry had been one of them, loud and boisterous. Out here, he was a different person, polished, kind, his smile gentle. Levi, ever the opportunist, mentioned the city's cultural grant and then seamlessly introduced Leo. Henry's smile grew even warmer, his demeanor 100 times friendlier than when Leo had first greeted him in the booth. The old soldiers exchanged glances. Life changes everyone. As long as the friendship remained, the rest didn't matter. After Alex had arranged for cars to take everyone home, the restaurant was left to the staff. It was time for their own late-night meal. And that was when Levi and Dylan Sloan pulled up in the Bentley. The white SUV was stunning, brand new and gleaming under the streetlights like a beauty queen on stage. "Leo," Dylan said, walking up to him. "The horse ranch is a bit far from campus, so I got you a car to make it easier to get there." Leo's mouth opened, then closed. The white bee with wings was for him. He knew being a trophy husband was a good gig, but this was next level. Seeing Leo's stunned silence, Dylan felt a little awkward and quickly added, "So, can I come back tomorrow and be your study buddy again?" Other people's top supporters sent virtual sports cars that flashed across the screen. Leo's top supporter sent a real one that was now parked at his front door. It was all about authenticity. If Dylan hadn't been a guy, Stella would have been seriously jealous. What was this? She was already on guard against other women, and now she had to worry about her boyfriend's generous big brother. She had given Leo watches and access to her apartment, and it had felt perfectly natural. It was part of her advantage, so why not use it? Why pretend to be a struggling student taking the bus with her boyfriend when she was a wealthy heiress? All that would get you is a life of endless struggle. But now, seeing someone else employing the same strategy, it sparked a sense of competition. Leo, being a good boyfriend in the honeymoon phase, kept Stella updated on his whereabouts. But he wouldn't say, "I helped so-and-so with this major problem." He'd just say, "I went to this place with my godfather." Stella had assumed he was tagging along with his godfather, the renowned doctor, on a house call to some important person. She didn't think much more of it. She had a filter on her boyfriend. He was a sweet, innocent guy, not the scheming type. And now, a Bentley had appeared. Victoria Vance had one just like it. Yesterday, he mentioned a friend from D.C. was visiting. Stella hadn't thought much of it. They'd only known each other a short time. Then she saw today's TikTok and thought the friend seemed harmless enough, if a little familiar. Of course, Leo would never tell Stella about all the gifts he received. If he did, she'd realize that everything he owned was a gift from someone. A man needed a few little secrets to maintain his allure. Yes, I'm a trophy husband, but you can't know that I'm a trophy husband to everyone. So how to explain the new top supporter and his Bentley? Dylan, having experienced the highs and lows of social currency these past 6 months, was attuned to nuance. He saw Leo's calm expression, but noticed his gaze wasn't on the car, but on a beautiful girl standing beside him. Dylan followed his line of sight. Wow, she had the same cool, aloof vibe as a famous actress in her debut film. This was not the kind of girl he would ever dare to pursue. She looked like the type who expected a ring. He preferred the kind who, when asked about marriage, would say, "Marriage? Nah, that's okay. I'll support you. We don't need to get married." So this was Leo's type. "You must be Stella," Dylan said smoothly. "A pleasure to meet you." It was his first time seeing her. Dylan still had the habit of giving gifts, a holdover from his dating days. First impressions were made with presents. For the unsophisticated, a handbag. For the discerning, jewelry. He pulled a small, carved tourmaline monkey from his pocket. It was about half a finger long, the body a brilliant blue with perfectly placed red inclusions for the eyes. He had bought it for about $15,000, but a rare gem like this had probably tripled in value. It was strung on a beautifully braided, colorful cord. "My apologies for not bringing a proper gift for our first meeting," he said. "This little monkey is kind of cute. You can use it as a charm for your bag." Most of the people there had no idea what it was. A few, however, knew. Jordan recognized it as tourmaline. It had to be worth tens of thousands. He was glad he was just a third-generation heir to a failing factory, content to live a quiet life. Socializing with these people was exhausting. Stella, having been raised by the free-spending Victoria Vance, also recognized its value. But Dylan's easy use of the familiar term Stella caught her off guard and made her blush slightly. For a couple in love, being acknowledged like that was a thrill. She accepted the gift graciously. Dylan had also noticed another girl with long hair, a fiery look in her eyes that seemed to linger on Leo, but he was smart enough not to hand out 2 gifts. The older might have. The new one was wiser. Just then, Dean Roberts and his friends were leaving. Levi was surprised to see his boss and went over to greet him. Director Hayes was equally surprised to see Levi, a promising young man from a good family who was also incredibly capable. His starting line was where Henry's own long-strived for finish line was. Henry was all smiles, treating him with the warmth he'd reserve for a favorite nephew. The dean's friends watched, bemused by the transformation. Just a moment ago, Henry had been shouting in the booth. Now, he was a completely different person. Levi, seizing the opportunity, brought up the cultural grant again and reintroduced Leo. Henry's smile grew even warmer, his demeanor several times more cordial than it had been earlier. The old friends just shook their heads. Life changes you. After Alex arranged for cars to take the veterans home, the restaurant was left to the staff. It was time for their own late-night meal. High above, in his top-floor office, Carter Hayes was practicing his golf swing on a small putting green he'd installed. Anything to distract himself from looking at the restaurant across the way. He felt like he was losing his mind. His friends had invited him out, but he'd stayed in, counting the number of customers at his old place. He'd never paid this much attention when it was his. He'd poached most of the staff, leaving behind a skeleton crew he barely remembered. How were they managing? He was starting to question himself, to reflect on his recent actions. Did I make a mistake? Where did I go wrong? He lined up a putt. Missed. He was too agitated. He looked up, instinctively glancing toward the restaurant. The cheap electric car was gone, replaced by a Bentley? A white Bentley Bentayga, brand new, with temporary plates. Wait a minute. There couldn't be that many Bentleys in this city. He had just sold his horse ranch and, as a treat to himself, had put a deposit down on that very car. He was just waiting for the funds to clear before picking it up. Had the dealership delivered it to his old address by mistake? He called them. What the hell? My car was picked up by someone else. It was as if the universe was singling me out for punishment, Carter thought, his mind suddenly clear. Is it too late to go over there and call him bro? Back at the restaurant, some of the staff went outside to get a closer look at the Bentley. Most of them had never touched a car like this. Some things in life are determined at birth. If you're born with it, you have it. If not, you don't. After a few minutes of gawking, they hurried back inside, worried they'd miss out on the food. The Bentley wasn't theirs, but the food could be. Chef Wu, however, had a different thought. The young boss's friends casually gift him a Bentley, yet he is so humble, so sincere in his praise of my cooking. I must work harder. He had worked all day, his arms and legs aching, but now he felt a new surge of energy. A good workhorse is a perpetual motion machine, fueling itself with coffee, tea, and self-pep talks. He'd wake up tomorrow and post on Facebook, another beautiful day. After a long day, Dylan was starving. He hadn't eaten much since his breakfast burrito from the student strip, a meal made memorable by the charming owner. Lunch and the afternoon had been a blur of paperwork for the land and car purchases. People had offered to treat him to dinner. Everyone wants to network with a big spender, but the memory of last night's meal had a magnetic pull. The longer he went without it, the more he craved it, like the memory of a first crush. To be honest, Dylan's love life was so prolific he couldn't even remember his first crush. Someone had once spun a story online that he'd been heartbroken by an influencer and was now forever chasing her ghost, replacing girlfriends like fish in a tank. It was complete fiction. The late-night meal, earned after a day of hard work, motion machine, fueling itself with coffee, tea, and self-pep talks. He'd wake up tomorrow and post on Facebook, another beautiful day. After a long day, Dylan was starving. He hadn't eaten much since his breakfast burrito from the student strip, a meal made memorable by the charming owner. Lunch and the afternoon had been a blur of paperwork for the land and car purchases. People had offered to treat him to dinner. Everyone wants to network with a big spender, but the memory of last night's meal had a magnetic pull. The longer he went without it, the more he craved it, like the memory of a first crush. To be honest, Dylan's love life was so prolific he couldn't even remember his first crush. Someone had once spun a story online that he'd been heartbroken by an influencer and was now forever chasing her ghost, replacing girlfriends like fish in a tank. It was complete fiction. The late-night meal, earned after a day of hard work, tasted exceptionally good. The second time around, he confirmed it wasn't a fluke. It was genuinely incredible. Tonight's fish wasn't the small variety from the day before, but it was just as fresh and delicious. As Leo prepared it, though, he felt a slight unease. The fish had been incredibly lively, thrashing about. But when the kitchen assistant cleaned it, he discovered its belly was full of roe, almost a full bowl's worth. This was why, as the old saying went, a gentleman stays out of the kitchen. It was better not to think too deeply about it. A fish about to lay its eggs, fighting for its life, only to be scaled and gutted. Some people considered this a delicacy, the roe a special treat, the meat extra firm. Leo had steamed it as usual, and it was delicious, but he couldn't bring himself to eat much of it tonight. Many people can't eat dog meat because dogs are so intelligent. But most people have no problem eating pork, unaware that pigs are even smarter than dogs. If you raised a pig like a pet for years, you'd see. But most are sent to slaughter within a year, before their intelligence becomes apparent. And they have the unfortunate luck of looking dumb. Sometimes a pang of compassion strikes, but then you take a bite and it's just so damn good. Whatever Leo thought, trying to shake it off. The Tao Te Ching says, heaven and earth are not benevolent. They treat the myriad creatures as straw dogs. The universe is impartial. He was just another cog in the machine, same as the fish. It wasn't his place to feel sorry for it. Who knew what his own future held? All he could do was take things as they came, do his best, and get on with it. With his mind settled, he joined the others. The meal was a happy, boisterous affair. Good food has a way of washing away the day's troubles. And Leo's culinary tonics were either delicious or, at the very least, strangely comforting. The restaurant staff felt it most acutely. They were working twice as hard as before, but they felt less tired. In fact, they felt invigorated, full of energy. Tonight's dinner table was a full one. Leo and his roommates, Stella, Jessica, and Hannah-chun, who Stella had pulled over, plus Dylan and Levi. 9 people in total. Before they ate, Levi quietly filled Dylan in on the identity of the sister-in-law he had gifted the pendant to, the massive, donor-funded building on campus. That was a gift from her father, Richard Vance. That was all Dylan needed to hear. A family that could donate entire buildings was in a different league. They were truly rich, certainly richer than him. The gap between the rich and the super rich was vaster than the gap between the average person and the rich. As a man who had gifted the Bentley, Dylan was treated like a king. Leo even served him several pieces of fish. Dylan was flattered. The car was worth it. Leo, I just really can't eat this fish tonight, and I don't want Stella to either. You have some more. Levi, ever the strategist, focused on building rapport with Leo's friends rather than Leo himself. He could see that Leo valued his relationships. He struck up a conversation with Alex, sharing insights from his own career path, offering genuine, practical advice that Alex eagerly absorbed. He also chatted easily with Jordan about their shared experiences with wealth and luxury, and with Sean about photography and editing. He was like a more polished version of Alex, slowly winning over the target's inner circle. Luckily, Leo was oblivious. Otherwise, he might have thought this Levi guy was trying to steal his friends. The women at the table weren't ignored, but the conversation was light. There was serious eating to be done. The arrival of the Bentley hadn't fazed Stella much. Her family owned one. But for Jessica, it was a shock. She'd been around wealthy people, but to find that the truly rich were right beside her all along. It sometimes felt overwhelming. It was the kind of wealth where, even if someone gave you the car for free, you couldn't afford to maintain it. Premium gas alone for a full tank would be over $100. Insurance, maintenance. It would cost $1,000 a month just to own it, even if you barely drove it. That was more than most people's salaries. Jessica ate in silence, the gap between her world and Leo's feeling wider than ever. She tried to eat away her frustration, but it was no use. There was no time difference between Bridgeport and Singapore. As she was eating, she got a message from Julianne. It was a photo, a beautifully decorated bedroom with her portrait, the one Leo had painted, hanging prominently on the wall. Julianne, I decorated a room for you. Do you like it? Jessica's hand, holding her chopsticks, began to tremble. This woman is insane. Insane, insane, insane. Tonight's meal was even better than last night's. Humans are simple creatures. Good food makes them happy. A girl says she's depressed. You could give her Prozac, or you could give her a warm bubble tea loaded with boba and cheese foam. Food can cure 80% of the world's unhappiness. The other 20% is because you can't afford the food. And good food was becoming an increasingly precious commodity. So many people felt their senses of taste and smell had been permanently dulled after getting sick. Nothing tasted as good as it used to. To find a meal that could break through that fog, that tasted vibrant and delicious, was a rare and powerful thing. The meal was a joyous occasion, filled with laughter. There were no downers at the table, just a group of fundamentally decent people from different walks of life. Spending time with these young people, Dylan felt a pang of nostalgia. Indeed, he was always the youngest, surrounded by his elders. Here, he was one of the oldest. Looking at their bright, energetic faces, he felt a twinge of envy. It was good to be young. When you're young, you feel like you have nothing and can't wait to grow up. When you're older, you look back and realize that even if you have everything, you've lost the one thing that matters. You cannot possess youth and the wisdom of youth at the same time. In that moment, Dylan understood. Being around them made him feel like he was back in college, full of passion and excitement. Levi ate quietly, observing. He was more mature, more calculating. He didn't believe in instant friendships forged over a meal. He believed in mutually beneficial relationships built over time. Despite his outward warmth, he remained detached. Dylan, on the other hand, was a natural. He was soon chatting with everyone, though his attention was selective. He didn't talk much to Sean, and he completely ignored Hannah, who was too busy demolishing her food to notice. He chatted with Stella and Jessica. He found Leo's girlfriend intimidatingly beautiful, but the long-haired girl next to her had a unique, captivating look, a kind of high-fashion allure that made his usual type, the sharp-chin, big-eyed influencers, seem cheap by comparison. Then it hit him why both women looked so familiar. He remembered looking up Leo before coming here. He knew Leo had been in D.C. for an art exhibition, where he had donated the proceeds from his paintings, over $1 million. The people in those paintings were sitting at this very table. The man was the photographer, Sean. The two paintings were of Leo's girlfriend, Stella, and the long-haired girl, Jessica. The portrait of Stella was beautiful and fresh, but it was the other one, the one splattered with red paint, that was truly unforgettable. It had gone viral in the art world. It had real investment potential. He'd heard it was bought by the wife of a Singaporean tycoon and taken out of the country. It was only after he was full that Dylan made the connection. The long-haired, melancholic beauty across from him was the subject of that painting. Wow. An artist can truly capture a person's soul. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, but with that paint in her name, she could have made a name for herself in high society. But marriage? Unlikely. He had to marry someone from his own world. The days of fairy tale romances bridging vast social divides were over. As long as he didn't get married, he could date forever. Happy and full, Dylan invited everyone to the horse ranch the next morning. "What's the restaurant's day off?" Leo asked Hannah. "We should have one, right? At least one day a week. Maybe Monday." Hannah, who was scraping the last of the fish soup and rice from her bowl, swallowed and replied, "Normally, restaurants have rotating days off for staff, but the restaurant stays open. Since we're a private kitchen, we could close one day a week. I can notify the regulars and update our hours online." She knew the best dishes were made by Leo. If he burned out, the whole operation would suffer. A day off was a good idea, so it was decided. Tomorrow, Monday, will be a paid day off for everyone. The staff erupted in cheers. After dinner, the group broke up. Levi took Dylan's hotel car back to his own hotel. Leo's crew had 3 vehicles, Mr. Lou's Volvo, Leo's Rivian, and the new white Bentley. Jordan drove the Rivian, taking Alex, Sean, Hannah, and Jessica back, dropping the girls off at their dorm first. Mr. Lou headed back to his love nest in the city, and Stella drove Leo back to his dorm in the Bentley. Leo didn't have his license yet, and besides, he didn't know how to drive this beast. He sat in the passenger seat, observing. But before they reached the dorm, Stella pulled the car into a dark, secluded spot. The two of them were alone. Leo climbed into the driver's seat, his hands exploring the controls, the dashboard, the soft leather of the seats. The car was quiet, except for the sound of their breathing. Back at his hotel, Dylan finally called the studious ex-girlfriend who had sent him $5,000. He explained that he was visiting friends and that he was fine financially. Her voice was bright and clear on the other end. "Oh, good. I was worried you were broke and thought I'd swoop in and buy low. You don't have to pay me back. It's just 1 month's salary for me." Dylan felt a mix of relief and shame. $5,000 wasn't a huge amount, but of all the women he had dated, very few earned that much from a regular job. Could he, if he started from scratch with no family support, make that kind of money? He wasn't so sure. It was a thought that would have never crossed his mind before. But tonight at Leo's restaurant, watching them all work so hard and so happily, he had realized something. Leo came from a powerful family, yet he was content to work in a kitchen, and he was happy doing it. And Alex, his father, was on track to become a major political figure, yet he was happily waiting tables. Dylan, who wasn't nearly as accomplished as them, had been floating through life, wasting his inheritance on frivolous and profitable ventures. When trouble hit, his first instinct was to ask for help. He needed to be more grounded. "I appreciate the thought," he said, then, on an impulse, added, "But you don't have to worry. Hey, there's a great restaurant here. I remember you like fish. You should come visit. My treat." Dylan was a master at this. He might not remember a girlfriend's name, but he never forgot their favorite things. To his surprise, she said okay. "She's really coming?" Dylan quickly checked her name on his messaging app, Holly Lynn. At least he'd remember it this time. He went to sleep with a mix of complicated feelings. Jessica got back to the dorm first, turned on the small space heater, and put on a kettle. By the time Stella returned, her hair slightly messy, but her face composed after the cold air had washed away the lingering heat of passion, Jessica knew. Leo had been eyeing Stella all night like a cat watching a fish. He hadn't even eaten the fish he'd cooked. He'd been too busy watching her. When Leo got back to his room, he was ambushed by Jordan and Alex, who playfully wrestled him to the ground while Sean guarded the door. They couldn't get the better of him, though. Leo was getting stronger. They were just jealous. A Bentley. Driving a Bentley in college. What would he be driving after graduation? After a bit of roughhousing, the envy dissipated. It was just boys being boys. "Sean, let's get our licenses," Leo said afterward. "We can take the practical and road tests together." He'd contact Professor Hoffman's driver, Walt, to arrange it. Walt was surprised. Leo had been dragging his feet, and now he was suddenly in a rush. "Of course I'm in a rush," Leo thought. "I want to drive my Bentley. I got a little taste of it tonight, and it was amazing." He slept well that night. The next morning, he got up for his run. Dylan wasn't coming. They had plans to go to the horse ranch later. Leo had learned that it was best to stick to his routine, no matter what else was going on. In the past, he would get so worked up before a big event that he'd be exhausted by the time it happened. The best way to do something was just to do it, without all the preliminary anxiety. He started his warm-up with Professor Reed. He was surprised when Dylan showed up. "I thought you weren't coming today," Leo said. He hadn't even asked Sean to film. "I wanted the real experience," Dylan explained. "Yesterday, with the camera there, I felt like I was performing. Today is for me." "Fair enough." Dylan even struck up a conversation with Professor Reed, asking if she remembered a student named Holly Lynn. He was just making small talk, but to his shock, the professor did remember her. Of course, she was the academic representative in my class. A very serious, very beautiful young woman. Professor Reed, having been a beauty herself, had a soft spot for pretty, smart girls. Dylan felt a pang of guilt. Was this the equivalent of meeting an ex-girlfriend's parents? After their warm-up with their favorite NPC, Leo and his new, high-level gear gifting teammate set off on their quest. Honestly, the gear was so good, Leo was developing a purely platonic man-crush on Dylan. The guy was just so generous. They ran toward the student strip, where Leo picked up Moose. Paige had been too busy to walk him, and the dog walker was clearly slacking off in the cold weather. Moose was getting seriously overweight. Dylan thought Leo owned a separate house on the student strip just for his dog. He used to rent apartments for his girlfriends there, but a whole house for a dog? Leo was on another level. Leo didn't correct the misunderstanding. He led Moose past the breakfast burrito truck. Exercise first, food later. No 4 pre-workout corn dogs today. Dylan wasn't afraid of dogs, but he preferred smaller breeds like corgis. Big dogs were too much work. This golden retriever was a handsome animal, though majestic and imposing, except for the bald patch on his head. Golden retrievers were bred to be powerful gun dogs, but now they mostly just chased frisbees. On the athletic field, it turned out Dylan was a fan of fetch too. Leo threw a ball, and Dylan and Moose took off after it, neck and neck. So that's why he didn't want the camera here, Leo thought, pulling out his phone. He didn't want his true nature exposed. When someone is making a fool of themselves, it is imperative to document it. Leo's photography skills were, in some ways, superior to Sean's. He perfectly captured the comical, dynamic shot of Dylan and Moose wrestling over the tennis ball. Dylan was incredibly photogenic. In person, he was a good-looking guy, but his real appeal came from the invisible stamp of wealth on his forehead. Even if his face were covered in pimples, people would see a golden toad, a bringer of fortune. Through Leo's lens, however, a different quality emerged. He captured a rustic innocence in Dylan, a playful, almost naive charm. He looked like the male lead in a K-drama, far more handsome than he was in real life. Perhaps it was because Leo, the photographer, held a deep and abiding affection for his gear-gifting teammate. The camera always reflects the photographer's emotions. Leo snapped a few pictures of Dylan and Moose, then sent the Moose photos to Paige and a lightly edited batch to Dylan. If a girl had a friend with this kind of effortless, on-the-fly photo editing skill, her life would be complete. Girls' afternoon outings were often elaborate photo shoots, the food and drinks mere props. Guys' hangouts rarely involved photography. If you knew a guy whose social media was full of high-quality photos, you had to wonder, who was taking them? A girlfriend? A hired photographer? With Dylan happily occupied, Leo focused on his run. A few steady, even pace laps, his breathing controlled. It was the best way to exercise the whole body. He avoided the common mistake of starting too fast, which only led to injury. It was like soaking your feet. Scalding hot water wasn't better, it just shocked the system. A gentle, warm soak was the way to promote circulation. A slow, steady run was a virtuous cycle for the body. Before he started this routine, he would sleep for hours and still wake up feeling sluggish. Now, he felt energized and focused. Dylan and Moose were having the time of their lives. Moose, discovering that this human stamina was far inferior to his own and that of his packmate Leo, was thoroughly pleased with himself. He even took it upon himself to train his new friend, dropping the ball far away and barking, "Come on, get the ball. Run, run." After his run, Leo, Dylan, and Moose headed to the student strip for breakfast. Today's menu was donuts and soy milk. But first, they had to buy corn dogs for Moose to prevent a rebellion. Seeing Dylan's hungry expression, Leo bought 6, 4 for Moose and 1 each for the humans. At first, Dylan thought, am I really going to eat the same food as a dog? But he was starving after the run, and Moose was eating with such gusto. He took a bite. It was surprisingly delicious, way better than anything his private chef made. Moose, seeing the humans' enjoyment, took a protective bite out of each of his 4 corn dogs, just in case. They went to the donut shop. The best donuts were always from places that used old, questionable-looking oil, fried to a perfect golden brown, crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. Dipped in soy milk, they were the perfect breakfast. The shop also made an amazing savory porridge, a cheap but delicious seafood feast made with rice batter, scallions, dried scallops, and shrimp. Sometimes the simplest food, served fresh and fast, was better than any Michelin-starred creation. If that wasn't enough, you could add a side of noodles tossed in peanut sauce. Dylan ate with a surprising elegance. Leo, finished first, took a few more pictures of him, capturing the charming image of a pampered young master, enjoying the simple pleasures of a street-side stall. Leo paid, and they got takeout for the roommates. When Dylan heard Leo was heading to the library to study, he made his excuses. Running and eating were fine, but studying? His brain just wasn't wired for it anymore. New knowledge just bounced off his thick skull. Leo bid him a cheerful goodbye. Rich people had the strangest hobbies. Who comes all this way just for a morning jog? He took Moose home. The dog was now the proud owner of a new necklace. Dylan, in a fit of generosity, had taken the Bulgari diamond chain from his own neck and fastened it around Moose's. For a moment, Leo had been tempted to stick his own neck out. Moose just barked. This thing is scratchy. Can I trade it for more corn dogs? Dylan, thinking the dog was thanking him, beamed. You're welcome. I'm glad you like it. Man and dog waved goodbye to their generous friend as he departed in a chauffeured car. As the car pulled away, Dylan looked back and could have sworn he saw the dog wave a paw at him. Was that dog for real?